On December 24, 1988, an Arizona police station received a call from the area in Pinal County, not far from the so-called Superstition Mountains. Witnesses had found the body of a young woman with signs of violence. She was in casual clothes and without a purse or any identifying documents, therefore, the victim could not be immediately identified. There was a deep wound on her leg, and blood was on her body. Her neck had been cut and was completely covered with stab wounds. All of her clothes were soaked in blood. An autopsy of the woman's body revealed that the injuries sustained were much more serious than they initially appeared to the witness. The victim had several deep, penetrating wounds in her neck that pierced the spine and practically separated her head from her body. 4 additional stab wounds had broken 2 ribs and pierced her heart. The most terrible marks were barely noticeable bruises on her left temple and eyebrow. The forensic expert was not certain, but suspected that these were marks from the sole of a shoe. On the ground where the body was found, forensic experts discovered similar marks, suggesting that she had been deliberately pressed to the ground with a foot to limit her mobility and inflict these fatal wounds. In addition to these obvious injuries, the unidentified victim had traces of prolonged beating on her face and body, scratches on her knees, and a defensive wound on one of her hands. It was clear that the crime had been committed with intent. Detectives believed that the killer should be sought among her acquaintances, but she had not yet been identified. However, that same day, the situation changed when the county police department received a call from Kathy Monkman, who reported that her older sister had gone missing the day before. The missing woman's name was Cynthia Monkman. Kathy explained that her sister had not shown up for a Christmas party, which was planned for the night before Christmas Eve. This was strange because Cynthia had been actively involved in organizing the event. She hadn't even warned anyone that she would not be able to come. After that, she stopped answering calls. Kathy did not immediately report Cynthia's disappearance to the police. She thought it was possible that Cynthia might have changed her plans. However, the next day, they were supposed to fly home together to Illinois. Kathy left a note with the flight information and a ticket for the 7:30 a.m. departure. She still hoped that Cynthia would show up, but when Kathy got on the plane and did not see her sister in the seat next to her, she realized that something terrible had happened. Kathy provided a description of the missing person that matched the found unidentified body, including the timeline of Cynthia's disappearance, which was just a day before her body was discovered in the desert. Detectives learned that shortly before her death, Cynthia had spontaneously married a man she had met a couple of months earlier. After comparing all the known facts, law enforcement officers came to the conclusion that they had found 30-year-old Cynthia Monkman, who was later identified by her sister and confirmed by dental records. Cynthia was born on September 16, 1958, in Pensacola, Florida. Her younger sister was born a year later, and from the very beginning, they were inseparable. Their father, Jack, was a psychologist, while their mother, Dorothy, became a housewife when the girls were born. Another child, a boy, was born 2 years later. The family moved to Champaign, Illinois, where their father was invited to work. The life of this close-knit family turned tragic when Dorothy discovered she had breast cancer. 2 years later, despite all efforts, Dorothy died, leaving Jack as a single father with 3 children aged 6, 4, and 2. It was not easy, but with the help of relatives, Jack managed to raise the younger generation successfully. After finishing school, the sisters remained inseparable. They attended college together, had a lot of fun and attended parties like other young people. They often made impromptu trips to meet old friends across the states. In 1980, Kathy decided to move to Arizona to study in nursing school, and Cynthia decided to follow her 2 years later. Cynthia eventually received a master's degree in public health and began a career as a nutritionist. In 1983, at the age of 25, she was offered a breakthrough opportunity to head a health center in a large Minnesota corporation and decided to take advantage of it. Having to move thousands of kilometers away from her sister to gain experience in her career, she soon grew tired of loneliness. In 1986, Cynthia decided to move back and settled in an apartment near her sister. Cynthia was a vibrant and attractive woman, always the center of attention. She had many suitors. In the first month after moving back, she met Mark, a DJ at a radio station and a local celebrity. They started dating. They led an active lifestyle and had a lot of fun, but their relationship was full of ups and downs. Mark wanted to maintain his party lifestyle, while Cynthia was looking for something more stable and was ready to think about starting a family. In July, 29-year-old Cynthia suggested to her boyfriend that they break up. After the breakup, she grieved for some time and found it hard to cope with this difficult moment in her life. To unwind, she and her sister went on a short trip to the beach in California. Despite the separation, the two young people still had mutual feelings for each other. On October 8th, at a party in a popular local club, Cynthia met two brothers, Michael Apelt and Rudy Alfred Apelt, who were both tall, attractive guys from Germany. Cynthia immediately felt a mutual attraction. Kathy realizing that her sister was head over heels in love. Michael was the youngest of 7 siblings, 5 years younger than Cynthia. The young people spoke English poorly, making communication quite difficult. However, as Cynthia put it, they were on the same wavelength, so they understood each other perfectly without words. The next day, Cynthia could not talk about anyone else. When she went to have breakfast with her sister, she even mentioned that Michael had said several times he was ready to marry her. Kathy was very skeptical about such a bold statement right after their first meeting, but Cynthia calmed her down, saying it was just the best way to forget about the failed relationship with Mark. Her friend Annette, who had gone to the club with them, met Rudy, and the whole group started going on double dates. Gradually, the couples began more serious relationships. Only a week passed before Rudy moved in alongside Michael, who also moved in with Cynthia. Everything happened so quickly that Kathy was amazed at the changes in her sister's life. She considered these hasty decisions would not lead to anything good. The relationship continued until December 17th when Cynthia and her boyfriend attended a friend's wedding. There, Kathy noticed a wedding ring on Cynthia's finger. It turned out she had already married Michael. Later, Cynthia confessed to her sister that it happened on October 28th, just 3 weeks after they met. Kathy was shocked by such a rapid change in Cynthia's behavior. For the first time, she was keeping a secret from her sister. Now, they found Cynthia's lifeless body. Detectives analyzed the scant evidence collected after her body was discovered, including tire tracks left in the desert sand. It was clear she had been taken there intentionally to be dealt with and abandoned in a deserted place. The criminal likely expected they would never find her. However, he made a mistake, and some people accidentally discovered Cynthia. Having learned the story of the last months of the victim's life, detectives suspected that either a stormy affair with the new guy or the abandoned boyfriend could be responsible for this brutality. The degree of cruelty indicated that it was something very personal. In addition to the tire tread prints, they found several traces, including a piece of nylon cord and a blood-soaked beach towel. Detectives continued to communicate with the close circle of Cynthia and analyzed her acquaintances. A few weeks before the breakup, Cynthia learned that one of Mark's ex-girlfriends had been found dead. The investigation into this crime by the Supreme Court was still ongoing by that time. Cynthia knew that Mark was trying to get back together with her. They had only spoken 3 days before the tragedy. There had been a verbal altercation when Cynthia admitted she had married someone else. She managed to resolve the conflict, but Mark said he was going to come to town for Christmas and suggested that Cynthia meet him. Cynthia did not come to the party organized before leaving, and no one answered the calls. When morning came, Michael called Kathy, shouting into the phone, trying to understand where his wife was. It was obvious that he was drunk. Kathy tried to extract some information from him about when he last saw her sister. When know that Cynthia was supposed to meet with Mark. At this time, Kathy assumed her sister might have run away with her ex. Kathy arrived at Cynthia's apartment, hoping to find some information about her, but found nothing. The only people against whom suspicions remained were Mark and current husband, Michael. Cynthia's photo was all over the news, and her relatives received a letter sent by her on the eve of the planned trip. It looked creepy because they already knew about her death. In this letter, she discussed her relationship with her husband. She expressed a desire for them to all meet and get to know each other properly. They couldn't communicate immediately with Michael due to the language barrier. However, on the day Cynthia's relatives learned about her death, one of the detectives from the police department was sent to talk to Michael. He was inexperienced in dealing with murders and brutal crimes, but he was chosen because he spoke German fluently. Michael opened up extensively and was amazed to find someone in the police department who spoke German. The detective was most interested in the chronology of events, particularly Cynthia's and Michael's movements on that fateful day, December 23rd. As it turned out, Michael became tense from the very beginning but managed to recount the events. According to him, Cynthia's car needed maintenance, so they took her car to the dealer for repairs. After that, they rented a car to return to the apartment. On the day of the incident, Cynthia was busy preparing for the trip and mentioned planning to meet friends around 10 p.m. Michael claimed that around 7 p.m., while he was taking a shower, he heard his wife talking on the phone. He noted it was a very aggressive emotional discussion, but he had no idea who was on the other end of the line since he couldn't make out most of the words, or even the names. After Cynthia hung up, she yelled that something needed to be taken care of and left without providing any explanation. While her husband was still in the shower, Cynthia took her luggage, purse, and went to meet her friends. Michael willingly cooperated with the authorities, allowing detectives to search his apartment and car. In addition, he provided a receipt from a restaurant dated the same day, on December 23, 1988. When the police listened to the answering machine recordings, one in particular attracted their attention. At 10 a.m., Mark called, said he had seen a girl resembling Cynthia in the news reports and had heard that she was missing. Worried about her, he asked to call back to confirm if everything was okay. Considering that he was in another state, it seemed strange that Mark had managed to see the news reports so quickly. According to the detective's calculations, during this period, they barely appeared on screens, making it doubtful as if Mark was trying to clear himself out of spite. Ironically, due to his limited knowledge of English, Michael did not yet realize that his wife had died. When Michael, Rudy, and Annette were taken to the police station, they reported what had happened. Michael was very emotional, crying and even screaming as he tried to understand why this had happened. However, after that, all three were taken to different rooms for independent interrogations. Shoe prints were checked, hair and blood samples were collected from all three. At the same time, their alibis were confirmed. After that, all three were released, as they seemed unlikely suspects. Questions remained only regarding Mark, who was behaving suspiciously. The investigator leading this case flew to California to talk to the radio DJ. During this time, Cynthia's phone in Illinois received multiple calls, and the caller left numerous messages on the answering machine, supposedly trying to figure out what was going on. The detective found that Mark had been working on the day of the murder. After his shift, he rented a car, went to Los Angeles to spend Christmas with his mother and sister. Much to the surprise of the law enforcement officer, his alibi was confirmed. He could not have been Cynthia's killer. Cynthia's burial was scheduled for December 31, 1988. During the funeral, when the floor was given to Michael, he could not even utter a word. He had an emotional breakdown. He just stood there crying until his brother, Rudy, pulled him off the podium. However, when everyone was driving around after the funeral ceremony, Kathy drove past the car in which the brothers were sitting and saw them laughing with Annette. This seemed strange. Now it looked as if Michael had been pretending to grieve the whole time. Kathy informed the detectives about her doubts regarding Michael, after which the law enforcement officers decided to interview all the suspects in the case again, as something didn't add up. The first one at the police station was Kathy, who provided more details about the love story that preceded the crime. Now, it seemed to the investigators that the brothers from Germany were suspiciously secretive about everything. They avoided sharing details about their work, tried not to specify unnecessary information about themselves and their past. Kathy recalled that a few days after meeting them, she saw them going to the cheapest motel in town, despite their previous claims of staying at the most expensive motel and being involved in banking activities. She could even swear that after their first visit to her apartment, she lost $100 in cash. Initially, she convinced herself that it couldn't have happened because of them, but now she had significant doubts. The brothers had too flashy an appearance, creating the illusion of wealthy young people. After a couple of weeks of dating, they concocted a ridiculous story about being fired from the bank. Practically forced the girls to let them live with them, claiming they were waiting for something and would return to luxury later. Another oddity was the need to keep information about Cynthia's marriage a secret. Just a week after moving in with her, Michael stated he would have to return to Germany if they did not marry soon, as he would be deported. This provided the reason for such a hasty and secret wedding ceremony in Las Vegas, painting a more sinister and plausible picture. It seemed that, taking advantage of Cynthia's feelings, Michael forced his new girlfriend into marriage. Detectives tried to track down the brothers' history and were able to find several women they had met after arriving from Germany. It turned out that Cynthia was not the only one they had proposed marriage to. While it seemed that everything was going well for Cynthia and Michael compared to previous attempts, their very existence appeared suspicious. When Cynthia's diary was found, the last entry was dated November 11th. It sounded like Cynthia trying to convince herself of her husband's sincerity. No evidence was found that could connect the brothers or other acquaintances in the victim's close circle. Detectives even discovered a car rented on the day of Cynthia's death, but the tire prints did not match the tread pattern found at the crime scene. The interior of the brothers' car was also checked with analysis, but this yielded nothing. Unexpectedly, on January 3rd, Michael contacted the only German-speaking detective and reported that, after returning to the apartment following his wife's funeral, he had heard a suspicious message on the answering machine. Michael believed it contained some kind of threat but could not fully translate it, so he asked the officer for help. On January 4th, he came to the police station with the recording. It turned out that someone had indeed threatened to kill all his loved ones and himself if certain items were not received. The caller confessed to cutting Cynthia's throat with a knife, but it was unclear what items were being discussed. Detectives immediately noticed that the words were pronounced with errors and seemed feigned, as if the person was reading from a script. The text contained distortions that were uncharacteristic of English, and when it was literally translated into German, the text sounded much more coherent. The detectives feigned concern, but suspicions against Michael, Rudy, Annette began to emerge and strengthen. Where this group lived, 24-hour surveillance was in place. On January 5th, police officers monitoring the apartment complex observed them at 5:30 p.m. At 8:30 p.m., a secret agent knocked on the door. The law enforcement officer was in civilian clothes and pretended to have the wrong door. In fact, he wanted to confirm who was in the apartment and ensured that they were suspects. Interestingly, immediately after this visit, Michael reported that two black individuals had threatened him on his doorstep. He was not caught in a lie. Instead, they were invited to the station the next day to create a composite sketch of these fictitious dark-skinned men. Michael was interrogated for several hours while the rest of his group waited. The detectives deliberately prolonged the process and closely observed them to see the first signs that the criminal's will was beginning to break. Annette was the first to give in. Although she did not confess for quite some time, one of the detectives began showing her photos of the mutilated victims. Michael and Rudy were seeking citizenship, so Annette was involved to maintain communication since the brothers practically did not speak English, only Michael could communicate somewhat. They tried several schemes to introduce themselves, either as manufacturers of surfboards or as importers of German cars. According to the same story, they met Cynthia. For several months, they lived in a cheap motel, deceiving many women who succumbed to their looks and charm as man escort. This allowed them to receive money from these women for a living, but they were waiting for something more. Annette did not admit to the murder or even that it was planned. However, it was clear that her relationship with Cynthia had been based solely on a desire for profit. After they began living together and got married, Cynthia worked 2 jobs while Michael spent money recklessly, claiming he was waiting for the unblocking of accounts in Germany. From October to December, he managed to spend more than $4,000 from his girlfriend's wallet. After obtaining this confession, the detectives pressured Annette, threatening that she would be charged with murder if she did not tell the truth. She confessed that Michael had developed a taste for the good life and wanted more money, after which he devised a larger plan. On November 7th, he convinced his wife Cynthia to contact an insurance agent and take out life insurance policies for $1 million on each other. The beneficiary of her policy was, of course, Michael. He continued to feed her false statements, saying that their accounts in Germany were frozen, but that he would soon have access to them, making life insurance essential for them. Cynthia blindly trusted her husband due to her feelings. The insurance agent approved the policy, but it was not for $1 million, it was for $400,000. Without hesitation, Cynthia wrote out a check. After that, the brothers began to plan their expenses in anticipation of receiving the money. They even drew up a purchase and sale agreement for 2 Jaguar cars worth $144,000 each and 2 Toyota cars, each worth $66,000. They were also looking for expensive items, fully aware that in order to obtain all this luxury, they would have to kill. Cynthia's life insurance policy went into effect just a day before her death, and the insurance amount was even increased to $800,000. By this time, the brothers had already rented a car in which they planned to take Cynthia to the desert and kill her. On the day of the crime, Michael and Rudy took Cynthia to the desert, then lured her out of the car and brutally handled her. Annette was even in the car. According to her, it took the brothers about 5 minutes to stab the innocent victim. When they returned, both were covered in blood from head to toe. They changed their clothes and washed the blood off their skin to avoid staining the car. After getting rid of all the evidence, they returned the rented car and went to a luxury restaurant to celebrate their victory. Everything seemed to go according to plan, and it was supposed to be the perfect murder that promised great riches, except that Cynthia's body was quickly found. The plan began to crumble before their eyes. Was Cynthia their first murder victim? To answer these questions, detectives contacted colleagues in Germany to uncover the truth about the brothers' dark past. They found that Michael did not have any blocked accounts containing large sums of money, nor did he own any estate in Germany. In reality, he was a laborer with a criminal past that included convictions for burglary and assault. His brother Rudy had served time in a German prison for abuse. Due to their criminal history, connections to other possible crimes in the USA could not be found, indicating that perhaps Cynthia was their first and only victim. There was only one perplexing question left. Why did the tire tracks of the car used to transport the victim not match the tracks that were found? It turned out that Michael had anticipated this. On the day of the tragedy, he drove in such a way that it damaged the tread on the tires. When he returned the rented car, the tires had to be replaced. The person who provided the car for rent helped the police realize that it was true. In order to leave sinister messages with threats, they used a random homeless man on the streets of Los Angeles. After Cynthia's funeral, he was paid to call the specified phone number and read a text from a sheet. Annette was offered immunity from prosecution in exchange for testifying against Michael and Rudy. She agreed. A thorough search was conducted of the apartment where Cynthia and Michael lived, leading to the discovery of a pair of shoes whose soles matched the footprints found at the crime scene, which confirmed Michael and Rudy's guilt. During the imprisonment of the individual involved, notes containing incriminating information were found and used against them. At the trial, the most reckless act was Michael's decision to speak in his own defense. Even his lawyers tried to dissuade him, but to no avail. He thought he was smarter than everyone else. His confidence worked against him, as he made several contradictory confessions that only convinced the jury of his guilt. Michael and Rudy made a desperate attempt to shift the blame onto Annette, but this also failed. August 10, 1990, the jury found Michael Apelt and Rudy Alfred Apelt guilty of first-degree murder. Both brothers were sentenced to death. However, in 2009, Rudy's sentence was overturned because an IQ test showed that he was mentally disabled. His sentence was commuted to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. After 25 years, Rudy applied for parole in 2017. At the commission meeting, a letter was read from Kathy, who recalled that it was Rudy who inflicted most of the knife wounds on Cynthia and slit her throat. Kathy was convinced that such a man was dangerous and should not be released. As a result, his petition was denied. On April 26, 2022, 52-year-old Rudy died behind bars. Michael's sentence has not changed. He remains on death row awaiting execution. His defense is deliberately delaying the execution appeal, prolonging his life. Cynthia's death was so devastating that it prevented Kathy from trusting men and people in general. She did not marry until she was 50 years old. The murder of Cynthia Monkman cannot be called a crime of passion. It was a cold calculation by sociopaths for whom human life became merely a tool for achieving material goals. Insurance companies, in their attempt to increase profits by selling high-value policies, unwittingly created the conditions for murder by providing the criminals with a financial motive. Evidence indicates that the Apelt brothers would not have killed Cynthia if her life had not been insured. They probably would have turned their attention to another victim. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Lydia Guardo. Raymond Guardo married Jacqueline in 1956. In the early years of their marriage, they had 2 children, a son named Bruno and a daughter named Nadia. At first, their family appeared to be typical and happy. However, after Nadia's birth, Raymond was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. While Raymond was in prison, his wife Jacqueline began an affair with another man and became pregnant. When she was allowed to visit him in prison, she informed him that the child was not his. Despite this, he tolerated his wife's infidelity and expressed his desire to adopt the child. Soon, on November 13, 1960, the girl was born, named Lydia Guardo. Years later, Raymond was released from prison, but his relationship with his wife Jacqueline has worsened. She was left alone to care for their 3 children and seemed to have little affection for them. So she decided to send her children to an orphanage, and soon after, her children were adopted by a family. Fortunately, the children were placed with a loving family that provided them with everything they needed to begin a new chapter in their lives. With this support, Bruno, the oldest child, always held on to the hope that his biological parents would come for him and his younger sisters. He even encouraged his sisters to believe that this would happen one day. While still in prison, Raymond saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a woman named Lucienne Ulpat, who was seeking a pen pal. After his release, he found Lucienne and soon married her. Following the marriage, he became determined to reclaim his children by any means. One night, he took a gun and broke into the home of the family that was taking care of his children. The noise frightened the girls. Nadia didn't remember what her father, Raymond, looked like, and Lydia had never seen him before. They thought he might be a kidnapper and were worried that they might be in danger. Raymond successfully took the children from their foster family and placed them in his car, despite their threats to call the police. After several hours of driving, he brought the children to his home, where he introduced them to Lucienne, telling them that she was their new mother and that they would need to follow her rules. During the first years of living together, everything seemed quite stable, at least judging by family photos from the time. The family moved to a new house in a quiet neighborhood. Raymond received a cash allowance and started his own business, which focused on instant postcard printing and various office tasks. Lucienne occasionally worked in his company, but primarily handled office work. However, as time passed, the family's life began to change dramatically. The children suffered abuse from their father, Raymond, and stepmother, Lucienne. Lydia's first memory from this period was witnessing Raymond beat Bruno for playing with a neighbor's child. When Raymond and Lucienne went to work, they hired young girls to care for the children. Upon returning home, he would pressure these girls to drink alcohol with him. On one occasion, he even attempted to persuade one of the girls to have sex, but she managed to escape. The girl's father then came to the house to confront Raymond and seriously injured him. After that incident, Raymond stopped hiring nannies. Later, he bought a trailer to take his family on vacation to the beach. Once they arrived, they spent time swimming and relaxing like other vacationers. However, an unsettling event occurred. While in the water, Raymond approached his daughter, Nadia, and pressed her against him inappropriately. She struggled to escape his grip, but this only made things worse. From that point on, she became the target of Raymond's abuse. Lydia recalls one day, she heard Nadia's cries coming from the trailer. This marked the beginning of Raymond's sexual abuse of one of his daughters. After that, parents, Raymond and Lucienne, often beat and do other terrible things to their children. Bruno and Nadia stopped going to elementary school, while Lydia, who had never been to school, faced severe mistreatment. This may have been because she was not Raymond's biological daughter. A few years later, around 1971, when Lydia was over 8 years old, the bullying began to get worse. The first incident occurs when Lucienne gets angry because Lydia comes home dirty after playing outside. Her stepmother, Lucienne, put her in a bathtub filled with boiling water and bleach. She recalls that her sensitive skin began to peel and float to the surface of the water. Hearing her screams, Raymond rushed into the bathroom, pulled she out, and laid her on the bed. He attempted to treat her burns with vegetable oil, but soon realized the injuries were severe. Then, she was taken to the hospital, and doctors determined she had third-degree burns. So that Lucienne wouldn't be responsible for the incident, Raymond blamed the city government for providing too hot water. Meanwhile, Lydia was transferred to the intensive care unit and then to the burns unit at the Lion City Hospital, where she remained for several months. She also underwent several skin grafts. Raymond is always by Lydia's side, not because he was a good father, but just to keep her from sharing the incident with others. Eventually, he grew weary of the situation and declared that he would take she home to continue her treatment. Medical professionals were against this decision, but Raymond secured the support of their family doctor, who wrote a confirming that he would continue to treat Lydia. Consequently, Raymond picked Lydia up and carried her out of the burn unit. Back home, Raymond begins to take care of Lydia. He regularly changed her dressings and started to touch her inappropriately. One day, he came home with a camera, claiming he needed to take pictures for the insurance company. He first photographed Lydia, asking her to smile, and then took pictures of her private areas. He then told the girl that the family doctor had prescribed this medicine. He forced her to inhale that drug, leaving her in a semi-conscious state. Although she was aware that he was about to do something strange and painful, she was unable to resist. At that time, he was sexually assaulting she. During this time, Raymond's wife, Lucienne, did not intervene. Instead, she encouraged his behavior. For 9 years, Lydia came to see what was happening as normal. She believed her father, Raymond, loved her, which led her to think there was nothing wrong with his actions. Years later, in an interview with a French television show, Lydia explained how Raymond justified his horrific actions. He told his children that he was doing this for their well-being. He also claimed that, as their father, he had the right to do so. In 1975, the Guardo family moved to the village of Coulombe, about 40 kilometers from Paris. At their new home, Raymond and Lucienne continued to abuse their children. The teenagers still did not attend school and had very little contact with the outside world. After returning to work, Raymond managed to get permission to park his printing van at a shopping center. To attract attention, he displayed photos of Lydia's burned legs on the van. Next to the photos, there were posters announcing that Lydia's injuries were due to the negligence of the authorities, and that they had yet to compensate her. Thus, he created the image of a father, calling for public attention and justice. When he felt that the photos alone weren't enough, Raymond forced Lydia to accompany him so that people could see her scars. He used the sympathy of bystanders to sell his goods and make money. Bruno was the first to try to stop the abuse from Raymond and Lucienne. Before that, Bruno, Nadia, and Lydia tried to escape, but they were caught and punished. Despite this, Bruno, who had suffered years of physical abuse, eventually managed to escape. According to some sources, Bruno contacted the authorities to report his family's problem. However, the authorities did not take his claims seriously. Meanwhile, his younger sisters, Nadia and Lydia, continued to suffer from Raymond's behavior. As they grew older, their bodies began to change. Noticing this, Raymond bandaged his daughters' chests with elastic bandages, making it difficult for them to breathe. The bandages eventually became tattered and dirty, as he did not allow them to be removed for months. He did not want anyone other than himself to touch his daughters. Years later, Bruno returned to rescue his sister Nadia, who was now an adult. He successfully saved her, but Lydia remained in danger. Raymond confined her to the dark, damp attic, where he abused her multiple times a day. She felt betrayed by her siblings for leaving her behind. She tried to escape from home several times, but Raymond spread rumors that she was mentally ill. So every time she tried to contact the authorities, they immediately brought her back home. After another escape attempt, Raymond even chained her up to keep her from fleeing again. When Lydia turned 18, Raymond decided it was time for her to have children. He was so determined to make this happen that after each intimate encounter, he would tie her legs together to supposedly increase the chances of her getting pregnant. At 19, she became pregnant for the first time, and for almost the entire 9 months of her pregnancy, she was kept on a leash. This was to prevent her from having an abortion. She gave birth to her first child on December 8, 1982. Despite becoming a mother, Lydia continued to try to escape, but Raymond caught her repeatedly and punished her harshly. On one occasion, he locked her in the attic for 6 months. During this time, she suffered abuse from Raymond and Lucienne, who often used kitchen utensils as weapons. The only companions she had were rats. She went on to have 5 more children between 1986 and 1996. Her youngest child, a boy named Rudy, is not Raymond's but someone else's, conceived while she was trying to escape. Raymond took great pride in his children, who initially did not even know who their real mother was. Neighbors, grocery store owners, and authorities representatives all came to congratulate him on having a large family and pay their respects. Every time Lydia was ready to give birth, Raymond would take her to a hospital outside the border. There, with threats to kill her, he would force her to say that he was her husband and the father of her children. He was skilled at manipulating and she felt powerless to resist him. It all ended in 1999. Raymond, who was diabetic, began to suffer serious health issues due to his neglect of his well-being. One day, his condition deteriorated, resulting in the amputation of several toes on his left foot. After the surgery, he continued to ignore the doctor's advice, and his health condition worsened. One day, Lydia visited Raymond in the hospital and learned that he had died the night before from a pulmonary embolism. This news brought her to tears, as she seemed to forget all the pain he had caused her. Before the death of the man who had abused her for a long time, she could not understand why she felt so sad. As Lydia left the hospital, she recalled how Raymond once forced her to promise that she would end her life immediately after his death. Years of his control had deeply affected her mindset. She walked to the nearest bridge and, in a moment of despair, jumped into the river. After she fell, she lost consciousness. Then, rescuers had pulled her from the water. In that moment, she realized that the horrors of her past were finally behind her. Thus, the 28-year saga of bullying, sexual assault, and imprisonment ended. She was free at last. After Lydia was released, she faced many challenges. As an illiterate and unemployed young woman, she needed to rebuild her life. She also had to reconnect with her children, who had been raised by Raymond and Lucienne without any contact with her. Fortunately, after years of neglecting the issue, the authorities began to support her. Initially, she was allowed to stay in the house where she had been held captive, although she was too afraid to go into the attic, the site of her abuse. Lydia's stepmother, Lucienne, who was 68 at the time, went to trial in 2007. She received a 3-year suspended sentence for failing to stop the crimes committed by Raymond. In 2008, this sentence was appealed and increased to 4 years probation. Lydia bravely shared her story with everyone. Despite still being illiterate, she collaborated with journalists and writer Jean-Michel Radem to publish a book about her difficult journey to freedom. In her book, Lydia criticized many government agencies. According to her, during the days when she escaped, they made her fall back into a bad situation without trying to understand the situation. She was especially critical of her stepmother, Lucienne, who not only ignored her suffering, but also actively participated in the physical abuse. She also criticized Bruno, Nadia, and medical workers who treated her injuries from burns, bruises, and cuts. She claims that medical staff ignored the obvious signs of her mistreatment and chose to remain uninvolved. Additionally, she criticizes her neighbors for not contacting any social services despite hearing the daily screams of children. Finally, Lydia expressed her disappointment with the French justice system for going easy on Lucienne. After publishing her book, the public became aware of the horrors she endured. Though some people advised her against sharing her story, she firmly believes that victims of such crimes should share their experiences, as it may help protect others. After gaining her freedom, Lydia met Sylvain Skurla. He seemed to come into her life to help heal her from the pain she had suffered. Shortly after they met, they got married and had 2 children. She expressed that she found hope in her husband and began to embrace life again. She participated in several media interviews and documentaries about her experiences, with Sylvain always by her side. However, the indelible traces of her time in captivity still remained in her heart. The scars on her body were a reminder of her past and the struggles she had gone through. With the help of a lawyer, Lydia appealed to the Judicial Commission for compensation. In her appeal, she detailed the torture and abuse she endured from Raymond and Lucienne, as well as her lack of access to education, which hindered her ability to find work. Additionally, she was not registered in the Social Security system because she could not write, preventing her from completing necessary forms. She also mentioned that burns she suffered as a child resulted in a degree of disability. Therefore, it was essential for Lydia to achieve several goals. First, to have her status as a victim recognized. Second, to receive financial assistance from the state to buy a home, ensuring she would never return to the place where she was tortured. On November 16, 2009, the Victims' Compensation Commission awarded Lydia over $100,000 in compensation. Her children, whom she had with Raymond, also received financial support. It was reported that they all found stable jobs, rebuilt their lives, and started their own families. Now, at 61 years old, Lydia has had a long and challenging journey to achieve a happy life. She needed specialized treatment for her emotional and physical scars for many years. However, with Sylvain's support, she was able to begin again. Despite everything she has gone through, she remains a strong and cheerful woman. Later, Lydia re-established communication with Bruno and Nadia. However, she admits that she still feels anger towards Bruno for not taking her with him. Hello, crime enthusiasts! Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Megan Imirowicz. A young girl's 18th birthday celebration turned into a nightmare. We'll find out in today's video. It took Konrad Imirowicz and Julia years to conceive. After unsuccessful attempts to conceive, they sought help at a specialist clinic. Medical professionals ran tests and determined that the couple would never be able to have biological children. The news devastated Konrad, 40, and his 31-year-old wife, Julia, who had always dreamed of a large family. However, they eventually accepted their situation. At that time, they had been married for over 2 years. In 2002, they adopted a baby girl named Megan. Just 3 days after her birth, she was taken away from her biological mother, who was struggling with addiction. Megan was placed in a more stable environment. A few months after adopting 2 children, Julia was surprised to discover that she was pregnant. They considered it a miracle and believed that the child was a blessing from God for their good deeds. Their 3rd child, Morgan, was also their only biological child. Although only one of their 3 children was biological, they loved them all equally. With 3 young children, the couple experienced the challenges of caring for newborns, including the constant need to change diapers. This made them consider starting their own business, as they realized how expensive disposable diapers could be. They created soft cloth diapers. The diapers were highly absorbent, and while Julia made them at home, Conrad worked on marketing the product. Their diapers became quite popular. Conrad worked in information technology at a local IT company. 3 years later, Julia became pregnant again and gave birth to a baby girl named Anne. It turned out that the doctors had made a mistake, and they were able to have a baby after all. During this time, the family lived in Rowland Township, Michigan, a peaceful and cozy area, away from the hustle and bustle of big cities. Conrad began drinking heavily. This put a strain on their relationship, leading to frequent arguments. Finally, in 2011, Julia decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, the couple shared joint custody for the first few years, but the children lived primarily with their mother. When the older children, Austin and Megan, became teenagers, their parents suggested that they choose which parent they wanted to live with. Their mother was quite strict, while their father was more lenient and allowed them to attend parties and invite friends over. Additionally, his new home had more space, so Austin and Megan decided to live with him, thinking they would have more freedom. At first, everything seemed great. The teenagers felt like they were enjoying their newfound freedom. Conrad struggled with his alcoholism and never overcame it. Over time, he drank more heavily and neglected household chores such as cleaning and chores. As a result, the house and yard became increasingly messy. What had once been a comfortable place became an unsuitable environment for the children. Morgan and Anne, who lived with their mother, stopped visiting their father altogether because they were embarrassed to discuss him and did not want to bring friends over. Meanwhile, the eldest son, Austin, began to argue more frequently with Conrad. Austin was frustrated with his father's behavior, but felt powerless to change it. As his resentment grew, it turned into anger, and he even resorted to physical violence when confronting Conrad. One notable incident occurred at a friend's birthday party of Austin's. Conrad arrived drunk and disheveled, which Austin found embarrassing. On another occasion, Conrad attended Austin's graduation drunk and slurring his words. That night, Austin even noticed a foul odor coming from his father. Before he turned 18, Austin began looking for a job so he could move out. He saved enough money to live with friends, which helped him escape the toxic environment at home. As a result, he almost stopped communicating with the rest of his family. Meanwhile, Megan, who chose to live with her father Conrad, was left to do most of the household chores, including laundry, cooking, cleaning, and making sure her father stayed out of trouble. This pressure may have contributed to her developing behavioral problems, which friends and family eventually noticed. Megan began to harbor resentment toward her father, especially after he threatened a teacher with a knife, which led to her being expelled from school. As a result, her father arranged for her to be homeschooled. For reasons unknown, Megan also did not seek help from her mother and had no intention of moving in with her. One day, Conrad was too drunk to take Megan on a business trip, so she took his car without permission and drove away. Unfortunately, Megan got into an accident and crashed the car, but she suffered minimal legal consequences. Meanwhile, Conrad's alcoholism worsened. The family's difficulties left Megan shouldering all the household chores. She was overwhelmed by the myriad of problems, and chaos in the house continued to escalate. One day, Julia came to help clean. However, It took her about 10 hours to clean just one room. When she went down to the basement, she was overwhelmed by the smell of cat urine. She suggested to Megan that they move in together to escape the hardships of living with Conrad, an alcoholic father. But Megan refused. She chose to continue supporting her father, and by 2020, the situation became completely dire. Trash filled the yard, and the house was a mess. During this time, Megan was Conrad's only source of support. Since 2021, he had been experiencing health issues due to long-term alcohol abuse. He would occasionally lose consciousness and have trouble controlling his bladder. Megan stayed close to her father. She felt that she couldn't leave him because she feared he wouldn't survive without her. Despite his drinking, but Conrad was never aggressive. He was actually a nice guy. They would argue, but their conflicts were usually just minor verbal disagreements. In the fall of 2021, Megan is planning to celebrate her 18th birthday. Although her birthday is September 29, she decides to have the party on October 1 after school so all her friends can attend. Conrad agreed to pay for the hotel room for the event, even though he initially objected. On the morning of the holiday, her father, Conrad, was supposed to take her to the hairdresser. However, when Megan woke up, she found him asleep on the couch in the living room. Conrad was drunk and did not respond to her attempts to wake him. Frustrated, Megan yelled that he had disappointed her, to which her father responded with a yell, then rolled over and went back to sleep. Megan became extremely angry and started throwing objects at Conrad. Then she asked a friend to take her to the hair salon. She also took a tearful photo and posted it on social media to express her frustration with the situation. The next morning, Megan took out her dad's bank card, but it wouldn't work when she tried to make a payment. She assumed she had entered the wrong PIN. She tried calling Conrad, but he didn't answer. So she asked her friend Kayla, who lived nearby, to stop by her house and ask Conrad for the PIN. Kayla arrived around 4 p.m. When she walked into the house and greeted Conrad from a distance, she was shocked to see him up close. He was alive, but his body was covered in grotesque sores. His fingers looked burned, and his legs had a greenish tint. Despite his condition, Conrad provided her with the PIN code for his card. Kayla then called Megan to inform her of the situation. Kayla was surprised that Megan heard the situation and remained calm. Megan advised her to ignore her drunken father. Kayla then called Austin, who came to help, and asked Kayla to report what she saw to the police. She called 911 and waited in the driveway for the ambulance. Kayla spent 15 minutes talking to Megan, but Megan did not seem to understand the severity of the situation. The ambulance arrived very quickly, and they took Conrad out of the house. At that moment, Austin arrived with his friend Lucas. Austin asked his father what happened, and his father assured him that everything was fine. When the two young men entered the house, they discovered blood and a white powder on the sofa where their father was lying. Nearby, there was an open bottle of chemicals. It appeared that the powder on their father's body came from this bottle of chemicals. Conrad recalled that his injuries may have been related to Megan throwing several objects at him before she left. However, Megan was not concerned about her father's health. She continued to call Conrad several times, trying to get his PIN, but received no response. Although she had paid for his beauty services, her frustration increased when she still could not reach him. Megan did not understand that her father was facing serious health problems and had been hospitalized. When her friend informed her of this, she misunderstood the situation and thought he was simply drunk. By this point, doctors had assessed Conrad's condition and discovered he had suffered severe chemical burns. Unfortunately, the hospital did not have the equipment necessary to treat such serious injuries, so they considered transferring him to a better-equipped facility. Austin called his mother and asked her to check Conrad's house again, as he needed to stay in the hospital. When Julia arrived, she was once again shocked by the state of the house while searching for a cell phone. During this time, the doctors ran some tests. They found that his blood alcohol level was very high. Despite being in the hospital for a long time, Conrad was still very drunk. It is difficult to imagine what his blood alcohol level was the morning he spoke to Megan. He explained the situation, but did not remember anything, and gave inconsistent statements. Before Conrad was taken to the new hospital, 3 police officers spoke with him. They gathered all the information they had, including the suspicion that Megan had used a white powder to intentionally harm her father. While one officer stayed behind to talk to Conrad, the other officers went to look for Megan. Julie informed the officers of the location where Megan was supposed to be celebrating her birthday, and several officers went there. Around 12:15, police spotted a car with several teenagers inside, including Megan. They took her out of the car to ask her some questions about the incident. During questioning, Megan hesitantly confessed that she may have thrown some chemicals at her father. She suggested that she may have accidentally thrown water, which then caused a chemical reaction. As a result, the police had to arrest her and take her to the police station. Conrad allowed police to search his home, where they discovered a bottle of white powder, a highly alkaline product used to clear particularly stubborn blockages. Megan was charged with assault with intent to cause serious bodily injury and 1 count of domestic violence. She was released on $75,000 bail, but she was unable to pay it and remains in jail. Meanwhile, Conrad is in pain in the hospital, and surgeons consider his condition to be serious. They need to treat multiple wounds and remove dead tissue to make way for new skin. Conrad underwent multiple surgeries and suffered from several infections. He also had difficulty speaking, which required a tracheotomy. This was due to his long-term exposure to chemical fumes, which damaged his lungs. He also required dialysis, and his condition continued to deteriorate rapidly. As a result, doctors decided that amputation was necessary. At this point, the Conrad had been suffering for over 5 months, and doctors still couldn't find an effective treatment. Conrad's mental state worsened, and he often requested to be taken off life support to alleviate his pain. More than anything, he wanted to go home. He was eventually discharged and allowed to return home, where some relatives visited him. Unfortunately, just 3 days after coming home, he died due to complications, which occurred on March 6, 2022. Forensic experts determined that his death was caused by poisoning from chemical reagents that harmed his lungs and kidneys. As a result, the charges against Megan were upgraded to murder. She was also charged with the negligent handling of hazardous chemicals that led to his death. The Megan spent nearly 15 months in prison before her trial started. The first hearing took place on June 12, 2023. During the trial, relatives and friends of the Conrad shared their testimonies. Their accounts were similar, which reinforced the credibility of the events being reconstructed. They expressed their belief that Megan did not intentionally kill her father. They emphasized that Megan loved her alcoholic father, Conrad, and took care of him. However, that day, in a fit of anger that he might ruin her birthday, she threw things at him without realizing exactly what she was throwing or the potential consequences of her actions. The prosecution has a different view of the situation. They believe that Megan intentionally collected the chemicals with the intention of harming her father. They argue that this was premeditated rather than impulsive. The prosecution questioned how the Megan could have randomly found the chemicals and water that led to such a reaction. The prosecution believes that Megan poured out the reagents and then added water, which caused the chemical reaction. Megan's defense attorneys countered the allegations. They argued that Conrad was on the wet couch due to a urinary problem and that Megan did not need to throw water at him. They suggested that she may not have even done that, as she seemed uncertain when speaking to the police. They also argued that the chemical could have been thrown accidentally and that Conrad's burns could have been caused by lying on the wet couch. A major problem arose during the trial. When the police initially found a bottle of chemicals, they did not collect fingerprints from the bottle as evidence. This mistake left a significant gap in the evidence, making it difficult for the prosecutor's office to prove exactly what Megan threw at Conrad. It is possible that the chemical was there by accident and not due to any wrongdoing on her part. Additionally, the burns on the Conrad's skin suggested that the alkali was actually rubbed into it. If Megan had done this, she would have been injured as well, but there were no gloves or protective equipment found in the house, and her hands showed no signs of burns. Alkali practically does not react with cold water at room temperature. It takes a long time for it to begin to damage the skin, and only with hot water does it react almost immediately. According to the lawyers, everything indicates that the Megan must have deliberately poured hot water into the bottle and thrown it at her father. However, all the circumstances of the case indicate the opposite, which means that she did not harm her father. After Megan left, there was serious consideration that someone else might have caused Conrad severe injuries. Suspicion fell particularly on Austin due to his odd behavior on the day of the incident and his strained relationship with his father and other family members. On July 15, 2023, a jury found Megan Imirowicz guilty, but the final decision rested with the judge, who scheduled a verdict hearing in 10 days. The verdict was controversial. Some believe that Megan intentionally killed her father, while others believe it was a coincidence. Megan herself claimed that she had no idea that mixing certain chemicals with water could lead to someone's death. On July 25, 2023, during a heartfelt speech in her defense, Megan apologized, expressed her longing for her father, and insisted that she never intended to hurt him. Megan admitted that she was unclear about what she had thrown at him. She requested the judge's understanding and support to help her pursue her dreams, which include earning a degree in marine biology and developing programs to assist children with depression, aiming to make a positive impact in the world. The Megan asserted that she does not pose a threat to society. The judge decided to give 15-year-old Megan another chance by sentencing her to just 1 year in prison and 5 years of probation. Megan and her lawyers were pleasantly surprised by this lenient sentence. Her mother and sisters supported her, believing she would start serving her sentence right away. However, she was released because she had already spent more time in jail than her sentence required. The prosecutor's office was unhappy with the verdict and requested that Megan be placed under house arrest, but the court denied this request, allowing her to move freely without any GPS monitoring. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Victoria Nasirova. On September 2, 2016, police received a call from Olga Zvik, 35, a Ukrainian immigrant who worked as a beautician, who reported that several valuables had gone missing from her bedroom. She explained to police that she had recently been to the hospital, where she experienced severe dizziness and nausea, with occasional loss of consciousness. Even after returning home, she continued to appear distracted. During the investigation, the police conducted a detailed interrogation of Olga. She recalled a recent troubling encounter with a client named Victoria Nasirova, who came to her home and insisted on urgent eyelash extensions. Victoria had been in contact with the salon before and often acted as if she and Olga were friends. However, on that day, Victoria asked to come to Olga's home to get eyelash extensions. Olga explained that she only worked at the salon and did not accept home customers, but Victoria deliberately ignored her explanation and insisted on urgent eyelash extensions, and Olga finally agreed. Olga later told the police that Victoria had tried to ask her out several times, but she had refused. Another notable detail was that Victoria looked very similar to Olga, which often made Olga feel uncomfortable. During the investigation, it was discovered that Victoria had shown up at Olga's apartment with 3 pieces of cheesecake from the best local bakery. Victoria ate 2 and insisted that Olga have a third, to which Olga eventually agreed. After a brief tea party with cheesecakes, Olga felt unwell. Once Victoria left, Olga became extremely nauseous and lost consciousness for about 30 minutes. When she woke up, she called 911 and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. However, the doctors found nothing wrong in her blood tests. Upon returning home, Olga discovered that some of her valuables were missing and reported the theft to the police. Police were initially skeptical of her story, suspecting that Olga may have been under the influence of drugs, which were causing her to hallucinate. Her unusual behavior and appearance contributed to their suspicions. Police concluded that her account of the incident, including her reference to a woman who resembled her, was likely fabricated. Olga firmly denied using drugs and presented her argument convincingly. She believed that her issues stemmed from a piece of cheesecake she had eaten, suggesting it might have been poisoned. The police quickly inspected the scene and discovered a box from a local bakery in the trash. Olga identified the box as the cheesecake Victoria had brought. The police collected it as evidence because it still had crumbs left inside. Analysis of the cheesecake could determine whether it was the cause of Olga's problems. The examination of the cheesecake revealed no abnormalities. Despite this, the Olga insisted that the dessert was the reason for her illness. She mentioned that she had visited the hospital, where doctors examined her but found nothing unusual. In response to inquiries about her condition and the tests conducted, police contacted the hospital. However, the doctors declined to share information due to privacy policies. The police interpreted this refusal as further evidence to doubt the Olga's claims. Additionally, they could not locate the client mentioned by Olga, leading to a postponement of the case until more information becomes available. A neighbor provided details after noticing a suspicious woman near Olga's apartment the following day. The woman appeared several times, lingering around Olga's apartment until she encountered the neighbor. The strange woman said that her friend Olga was sick and then left in a hurry. Concerned, the neighbor noticed that Olga's apartment door was open and decided to check on her. When she entered, the neighbor found the apartment uncomfortably hot, with the heating system on full blast despite the hot summer weather. Olga was alive but unconscious in bed, dressed strangely, in a revealing bra and sweatpants. The police felt that someone had deliberately changed her clothes. Scattered around her were powerful pills, suggesting that Olga may have taken them with the intention of ending her life. The neighbor quickly called 911, describing the strange woman as dark-haired, attractive, and very similar to Olga. After receiving new information, the police were convinced that the woman who resembled Olga was real and not a figment of Olga's imagination. Therefore, the police intensified their efforts to investigate the case. The police suspected that Victoria Nasirova, who was involved in a cheesecake in the previous case, was involved in this case. The police began searching for Victoria, but they had no clues or even any photos of her. However, a private investigator, who had been monitoring Victoria's activities for a long time, tracked Victoria down on the internet and contacted the police. He located Victoria, where she was advertising her escort services on a dating website and social media. The private investigator suspected that she used these platforms to find victims for her crimes. Her methods were effective. Victoria would meet her victims, drug them with psychotropic substances to render them unconscious, and then steal their valuables. Meanwhile, Olga eventually recovered from her traumatic experience. After leaving the hospital, she shared her story of poisoning on social media. Soon after, one of her clients mentioned a man named Ruben Barakov who had gone through a similar situation. Ruben owned a dry cleaning business and had met a woman named Victoria on a Russian dating site a few months before Olga suffered cheese poisoning. Victoria had invited Ruben to her home, bragging about her cooking skills. He accepted the invitation, but as soon as he tasted her food, he passed out. Victoria then rummaged through his pockets, taking an expensive watch, cash, and cards. Ruben was under the influence of a powerful psychoactive substance and truly believed that it had nearly killed him. Victoria then took him to a dry cleaner's. She explained to Ruben's colleagues that he was drunk and she left. When Ruben regained consciousness, he realized that he had been robbed. The private investigator suspected the situation was much more serious and that the two victims were lucky to be alive. In 2017, He worked with a client from Russia who asked him to help track down a dangerous criminal. Nadia Ford contacted the private investigator after her biological mother, Alla Alexienko, went missing. Nadia currently lives in New York, USA, but was born in Russia. Nadia, who is from Krasnodar, was raised by her mother, Alla, who worked hard to provide for her children. Nadia had dreamed of living in the United States since she was a child, and her dream came true when she came to study in America in 2007. While there, she met a man, married him, and took his last name, Ford. However, their marriage did not last, and they eventually divorced. Nadia chose to stay in the United States and successfully built her life there. She kept a close relationship with her mother, Alla, who was living alone at the time. Alla sold her house and then moved to a new apartment. In early 2013, after moving into a new apartment, Alla had a new neighbor named Victoria Nasirova. Despite the significant age difference, Victoria quickly became friends with Alla. Alla shared stories about her daughter's life in the United States, which sparked Victoria's interest in visiting America and meeting Nadia. Alla then arranged for them to meet. In September 2013, Victoria went to New York, where she met Nadia, and they became close friends. Nadia was a kind and pleasant woman. Victoria sought her advice on how to stay in the United States, and Nadia shared a few tips. However, Victoria's plans did not work out, and she eventually returned to Russia. Despite this, she maintained a close relationship with Alla. In the fall of 2014, Victoria planned another trip to the United States, and she told Alla that she could help send gifts to Nadia. Trusting Victoria, Alla happily agreed. Alla then brought $6,000 in cash and valuables, including 2 expensive mink coats, to send to Nadia. Victoria then repeatedly postponed her trip to the United States for various reasons, leaving Alla worried about whether she would actually go and what would happen to her gifts. Worried, Alla called her daughter Nadia to express her concerns. Nadia reassured her mother and suggested that she ask Victoria to return her belongings. On October 4, 2014, Alla called Nadia with the good news that she had finally spoken to Victoria, who agreed to return her valuables. However, this never happened, and Alla soon disappeared. Nadia kept calling her mother, but she didn't answer. This was unusual since they were in contact every day. Worried, Nadia contacted Victoria to ask about her mother. Victoria confirmed that she had seen Alla, and they had talked and had tea together. Victoria then left, never saw Alla again. Victoria mentioned that Alla was planning to go somewhere, but she didn't know where. Victoria also tried to contact Alla, and even visited Alla's apartment to check on her, but there was no sign of her mother being home. Alla was still unreachable. After a few days, Nadia and her brother received a number of unusual text messages from an unknown number, supposedly from their mother Alla. The messages stated that there was no need to look for her because she was happy. However, the way the messages were written was inconsistent with Alla's style, which raised their concerns. Nadia realized that something was definitely wrong and decided to book the next flight to Russia to assist in the investigation into her mother's disappearance. Upon arriving in Krasnodar, Nadia went to her mother's apartment, but it was stripped of valuables that Victoria was supposed to return. There was no trace of her mother. Concerned, Nadia quickly contacted the police and reported her mother's disappearance. She informed the police about her suspicions regarding Victoria, a neighbor of her mother who had become suspiciously close to her and failed to return Alla belongings. It soon became clear that Victoria had a motive to harm Alla. The police were interested in the information and devised a plan. Nadia called Victoria and pressed Victoria for information about her mother's whereabouts. Victoria, angered by Nadia's questions, shouted that her mother was still alive, but Victoria did not know where she was. The police, who had been listening in on the call, decided to approach Victoria. At her home, she successfully convinced the police that she was not involved and claimed that Nadia's accusations were baseless, with no evidence against her. Meanwhile, Nadia returned to her mother's apartment to investigate. She noticed that the place was surprisingly clean, with no dust, as if it had just been thoroughly cleaned, despite her mother's absence for several days. This raised questions for Nadia. Who could have cleaned the apartment? Additionally, she discovered that several valuable items, including jewelry and $50,000 in cash, were missing. Concerned, Nadia decided to report this to the police. The police, after speaking with Victoria, tried to persuade her that her mother had taken the money and jewelry on a trip and would be back soon. However, Nadia did not buy this explanation. She sensed that her mother was in danger and that it had something to do with Victoria. Nadia reached out to all her mother's friends and relatives, but no one knew where her mother was. In her desperation, Nadia printed flyers with her mother's photo and posted them all over the neighborhood. She also drove around the city, visiting her mother's favorite places, but her efforts were unproductive. Nadia contacted Victoria, begging her to return her mother and expressing her willingness to do anything, even offer a reward. However, Victoria denied any involvement. Despite this, Nadia remained hopeful that her mother was still alive and continued to search. She regularly went to the police for updates, but there was no information about her mother. Determined to find answers, Nadia hired a private investigator. After investigating, the private investigator discovered that Victoria had rented a car from a service center on the day Alla went missing. He checked the car's information and reviewed surveillance camera footage from October 5, 2014. The videos show a car driving on a highway outside the city. There were two people inside, Victoria, who was driving, and Alla Alexinko, motionless in the front passenger seat. She shared this information with the police, who confirmed that Victoria had rented the car and brought her in for questioning. Victoria admitted that she had driven the rental car that morning, October 5, but she denied that there was anyone else in the car with her. Victoria agreed to take a lie detector test. After completing the test, she was released, but the results later showed that she had failed, leading the police to consider her a prime suspect in the case. Before the police could arrest her, Victoria fled the country without notifying the police. They began searching for Victoria. Nadia remained in Russia for another 6 months to assist in the investigation, holding out hope that her mother was still alive. She also contacted Interpol for help in finding Victoria. Police traced the rental car to a dense forest in Armavir, which turned out to be Victoria's hometown. This is where the search for Alla began. Nadia's hopes of her mother's safe return were dashed in April 2015, when police informed her of the tragic news. Her charred remains were found in the same forest, about a 3-hour drive from where Alla went missing. Nadia was able to identify her mother through her dental records, as the rest of her body was badly burned and unrecognizable. The cause of death could not be determined. Following the identification, an arrest warrant was issued for Victoria Nasirova, and her case was referred to Interpol. After her mother's funeral in Krasnodar, Nadia returned to the United States. She found it difficult to cope with her mother's death and was unable to work for a long period. Eventually, she gathered her strength and made a promise to her mother that she would seek justice and ensure that those responsible for Alla's death would be punished. One day, Nadia discovered a photo of Victoria on social media. The wanted woman was showing off her lavish lifestyle in Mexico. After discovering this, Nadia contacted the U.S. police to report Victoria's whereabouts, and they began an investigation. At this point, Nadia hired one of the top private detectives in the United States to speed up the investigation. A wealthy friend of Nadia covered the cost of the detective's services, which she could not afford since she had not been working for several months while searching for her mother. The private detective thoroughly examined Victoria's social media photos and was able to confirm that she was already in the U.S. One of the selfies, taken while wearing sunglasses, showed a reflection of a car's dashboard. After examining hundreds, even thousands of cars, the private investigator determined it was a Chrysler 300. The private investigator was able to determine that the last photos were taken in Sheepshead Bay, a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. By checking a database of cars in that area, he was able to narrow down his search and identify a suspect. He discovered that Victoria was living with her boyfriend in an apartment complex just 5 blocks from Nadia, and that the Chrysler was registered to her new boyfriend. Victoria was probably unaware that the case had escalated to the point where Interpol had a global warrant for her arrest, which is why she felt safe posting her photos online. The private investigator located the boyfriend and contacted him. It was discovered that he had been poisoned by Victoria. She followed her usual methods of poisoning her boyfriend and even poisoned his beagle, which unfortunately died. Victoria's freedom poses a danger, as her potential victims could increase. The police searched Victoria's apartment and discovered Olga Tzvik's identity card. This discovery sheds light on why Olga was targeted by Victoria. Victoria needed money and valuables, but she also needed an ID that. With her temporary visa about to expire, she was looking to use someone else's ID to avoid returning to Russia, where she would have to stand trial. Police believe she intended to kill Olga, the real owner of the passport, to steal their identity. Fortunately, Olga survived thanks to the quick action of a neighbor. Additionally, the box containing the remains of the cheesecake was sent for analysis, marking a significant breakthrough in the investigation. The investigation returned to the lab, where researchers analyzed the cheesecake. It was determined that Victoria had used a sedative, but she had used a higher dose, which rendered her victims unconscious. Olga was lucky to survive after eating the cheesecake. The high temperature in her apartment was no accident. Heat amplifies the effects of the drug and can even be fatal. Victoria apparently knew this, so she increased the temperature in the house and tried to dress Olga in warmer clothes. But luckily, Olga was discovered by neighbors in time. After her arrest, Victoria denied all allegations against her, including the murder of Alla, who was Nadia's mother. She also rejected claims that she attempted to murder Olga Tzvik and other victims. Victoria had previously been a suspect in the theft of 2 fur items in May 2016, but that case did not progress. Additional incidents emerged involving her in thefts, where she would meet men online, visit their homes, drug them, and rob them. Most of the men chose not to report these crimes to the police due to concerns about publicity, allowing Victoria to evade consequences. The trial was delayed for a long time. The case finally went to court in January 2023, attracting considerable media and public attention. Victoria chose not to testify at the trial and remained silent. The court could not discuss the details of Alla's death because it happened in another country. Victoria's defense argued that there was no evidence that Victoria had poisoned the cheesecake and forced Olga to eat it. Victoria herself ate 2 pieces in front of Olga and had no problems. The prosecution then argued that Victoria had only added poison to 1 piece of cheesecake, specifically the 3rd piece she offered Olga. She ate the other 2 pieces without the poison. This misled Olga. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury found Victoria Nasirova guilty of 2nd-degree murder. Although the maximum sentence for the crime is 25 years, the judge shortened her sentence to 21 years. By law, she could apply for parole after serving 15 years. Victoria faced harsh prison life. She frequently complained about poor food and inadequate medical care. During her incarceration, she was attacked, leaving her scarred and nearly blind. After the attack, Victoria sued the prison, alleging that guards were negligent in failing to support her. The case ended in a $325,000 settlement. In a recent interview from prison, Victoria denied any wrongdoing, including Alla's murder. She claimed that she had nothing to do with poisoning beautician Olga with the cheesecake, explaining that she had eaten the cheesecake herself and had not become ill. Victoria said that she had only shared a piece of cheesecake with Olga and had not forced her to eat it. After completing her prison sentence in the United States, Victoria will be deported to Russia, where she will face trial for Alla's murder. Her daughter Nadia said she was relieved that Victoria was in prison and would not be able to escape justice. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nicole Pitts. Nicole Pitts was born in late February 1973 and grew up in King County. She attended Eastern Washington College. Every summer, her family traveled to Seattle and spent much of their time at Lake Samash. Nicole had a close relationship with her mother, Gail, and had a good relationship with her father, Rod. In the 1990s, while working at a fitness club, she met her future husband, David. Their relationship quickly developed into a romantic relationship. After spending some time together, they married in 2002 in Maui, Hawaii. In 2005, the couple bought a condominium in Linwood, Washington, a place where they could enjoy their time together. At that time, Linwood was a quiet town with a population of fewer than 40,000 people. It featured narrow streets and many bars and restaurants, similar to their previous home. The young family quickly fell in love with the area. Nicole was outgoing and made friends easily. Within days of moving in, she had made many new friends. She is an animal lover and often walks her dog around the neighborhood or relaxes at home with her 2 cats. She cares for them as if they were her own children. Nicole's career was going well. After finishing school, she worked at a fitness club for a while, before becoming a corporate manager at a mobile phone company. She lived close to where she worked. Nicole was an important member of the team because she easily connected with her colleagues and helped them solve problems. However, she faced challenges from an early age. She was introduced to alcohol as a teenager and eventually became an alcoholic. This started when her parents divorced, which left her feeling lost. Her mother, a flight attendant, was often away on business trips, so Nicole was often left in the care of her elderly grandmother, which led to her hanging out with the wrong crowd. Fortunately, Nicole's parents noticed their daughter's issue early on, and with the support of her family, she was able to overcome her bad habit. They attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings together, where she received guidance, making her journey easier. However, her alcohol use had lasting effects, resulting in significant health problems. At age 21, Nicole was diagnosed with endometriosis and underwent 3 surgeries. Following these procedures, she was prescribed pain medication to control her chronic pain. By 2006, 32-year-old Nicole had been avoiding alcohol for 8 years. Despite this, she remained an active and valuable member of her Alcoholics Anonymous group. She attended every meeting, viewing them not just as a way to manage her own recovery, but also as an opportunity to support others in their struggles. Nicole understood the challenges of the fight against addiction. From a young age, she had a passion for cooking, which only grew stronger over time. She loved preparing a variety of dishes and often brought her homemade meals to work for her husband, David, who always appreciated her efforts. Nicole was very close to her mother and called her every day. In early 2006, she was excited about her upcoming 33rd birthday. However, just 2 days before her birthday, she unexpectedly missed an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in nearby Renton, surprising everyone. That night, David returned home late from work and went straight to bed, thinking Nicole would still be home. However, the next morning, he discovered that she had left, and he never saw her again. David tried calling Nicole to check on her, but she didn't answer his calls. He was worried that she might be upset because he hadn't spoken to her at dinner the night before and had gone to bed early from exhaustion. Despite his attempts to contact her, Nicole remained silent, which made him even more worried. He also contacted some of her friends and her mother, but no one had seen her. That evening, when David returned home and Nicole had not returned, he became alarmed. Worried, he decided to go to the sheriff's office, but was told that there was not enough time to classify her as missing. However, David convinced the police to investigate her whereabouts, as her behavior was very unusual, and he feared that something might have happened to her. Police arrived at David's home and discovered that, in addition to Nicole, her 2003 Volkswagen Jetta was also missing. Nicole had left for work that morning, but was gone. Her mother became concerned about Nicole's disappearance, especially since she had not received any calls from her daughter all day, which worried her. After police confirmed that no one had seen Nicole since she went missing, they began searching for her that same day. The family of the Nicole booked flights to Washington, hoping for the best and wanting to assist in finding their daughter as quickly as possible. Everyone was confused because Nicole was known to be reliable and responsible. She would never have vanished or ignored calls. Even if she couldn't answer right away, she would have called back soon. As her silence continued, her parents and husband grew increasingly worried. Those involved in the search for Nicole sprang into action immediately. Nicole's mother and stepfather went straight to the police upon arriving in the city. Members of the Alcoholics Anonymous Club, who cared deeply for Nicole and wanted to support her family, also joined the search efforts. The club was significant to Nicole, as she never missed a meeting and was set to receive an award for 8 years of sobriety, which she took great pride in. There was no reason for her to leave or abandon everything. Nicole's voicemail was filled with calls from friends and family, but none of them had been able to reach her. Some were concerned that Nicole might have relapsed, despite successfully battling her addiction for years. The police were actively searching for her, searching the surrounding areas of Linwood, but they found nothing. Meanwhile, Nicole's parents took action by creating a website to gather information about Nicole. Many people responded to the family's call for help, but most of the messages were just well wishes, and the little information they received turned out to be false. The search seemed to stall until a new event changed the course of the investigation. On February 7, a local resident was jogging near a wooded area of San Francisco Park, near a small lake. He accidentally discovered a strange object under a raspberry bush. Curious, he approached and was horrified to discover the body of a girl. A nearby witness quickly called the police. The police arrived in time, and acquaintances recognized the body as Nicole's. Forensic experts later confirmed that there was no evidence of rape. After the autopsy in the laboratory, it was proven that the Nicole had received multiple injuries during the beating, but the cause of death was asphyxia. The Nicole had multiple blunt force injuries on her legs, torso, and head, indicating a brutal murder driven by personal hatred. This raised the question, who could have done this? Nicole had no known enemies. The case was changed from a disappearance to a murder investigation. The news of her death was devastating for David and parents. News of her death devastated David and her parents. Police began investigating her bank card transactions to trace her final movements. They discovered that her card was last used on January 30 in a nearby town where she had paid for gas. Police requested video footage from the gas station, suspecting that the killer may have made the purchase instead of Nicole and hoping to identify him in the footage. While police wait for surveillance camera footage, they continue to search for Nicole's car, as it may contain important information for the case. Police reviewed Nicole's identity and social connections, but still found no clues. Nicole was known as one of the friendliest members of her work group and club. She had no enemies. Instead, she was a devoted friend, a loving wife, a caring daughter, and a skilled employee who loved her pets. Nicole even turned her own struggle with alcohol into a positive by supporting others who were trying to get sober, setting an example for them. While the police were searching for the car, her relatives and friends shared information about the missing car and Nicole's situation. They publicly appealed for help, urging people to be aware of the car and avoid touching it. Flyers were distributed that stressed the importance of calling the police immediately if the car was discovered, as the car was linked to Nicole's murder. This prompted local residents to pay attention to Nicole's car. On February 21, 2006, her car was discovered parked near the university. Police quickly seized the car for forensic analysis, hoping to gather evidence to arrest the perpetrator and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. Inside the car, they discovered a large amount of trash and various items, including books and sports equipment. Police discovered that after Nicole went missing, someone had used her ID and credit cards. Police are investigating the possibility that Nicole's car may have broken down on the way and she was picked up by a stranger and harmed, and the location of her car was unusual because Nicole was supposed to be traveling to another city. The position of the car seat suggested that it had been driven by someone much larger and taller than her. In the lab, experts meticulously measured the seat position to gather clues about a potential suspect. They found DNA evidence inside the car, including hair and a single fingerprint. Police collected DNA and checked. Several patrol officers searched the area where the car was found. They asked anyone nearby if they had seen Nicole's car or who had parked it, but this did not yield any useful information. The police discovered that the car had been parked in the lot since February 10, as an illegal parking ticket from that date was stuck to the windshield. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras available to assist in the investigation. Forensic tests showed that all traces of DNA in her car belonged to Nicole and David. The investigation yielded no new information to solve the case. By early April, there had been no progress. Nicole's parents had offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to the arrest of the perpetrator. During this time, Nicole's mother, Gail, made frequent appearances on various television channels to raise awareness of the case. After a while, Nicole's family had to return to Arizona to work, but they kept in touch with the police who were handling the investigation. Nicole's father, Rod, was heartbroken and frustrated that the investigation was taking so long. Despite their efforts, the investigation continued without any breakthroughs. In September, the case was handed over to an experienced police officer. The new police quickly requested a search warrant for the house of the Nicole, which had not been done before. He aimed to find clues among her belongings, particularly on Nicole's computer. Unfortunately, the house revealed no signs of a crime, no blood or other evidence. The computer also yielded no useful information. Police continued to interview witnesses and acquaintances of Nicole. One of them was Barbara, a friend who had met Nicole at an Alcoholics Anonymous club. They had planned to meet at a coffee shop the evening Nicole went missing, but she never showed up. At first, Barbara thought Nicole was just running late. Then Barbara tried calling Nicole several times that day, but Nicole did not answer any of her calls. During this time, the police still had no clues to the case. Meanwhile, Nicole's parents, Rob and Gail, were at their home in Arizona. Their grief did not subside for a year. Feeling desperate, they decided to hire a private investigator because they were puzzled by the inconsistencies in the case. Nicole had left the house without her wedding ring, which was very unusual for someone who was so proud of her marriage and who would never willingly remove such a meaningful symbol. A private investigator began his investigation, but no leads were found. Nicole's family then increased the reward for information about the criminal to $25,000. Organizations focused on fighting crime and finding missing persons contributed an additional $1,000. The community remained tense, knowing that a dangerous criminal was still at large, the perpetrator seemingly without a motive, suggesting that he could be a madman ready to strike at any time. The police then requested a search warrant for Nicole's computer, believing it might contain clues about the criminal. In October 2009, the private investigator hired by Nicole's parents was charged with fraud. He falsely claimed to have found evidence in the case, but said he needed money to handle it. Her parents gave him more money, but then the private investigator disappeared and took on another case. As a result, his license was revoked. Nicole's parents no longer have a private investigator and no leads on the identity of the killer. In 2011, 5 years after Nicole's death, The investigation was still ongoing, but no significant updates were made. On March 21, 2012, the final suspect was arrested and revealed to be Nicole's husband, David. By this time, police had enough evidence against him. He was held in custody with bail set at $1 million. The prosecutor noted that the case had progressed significantly due to new technologies that were previously unavailable, especially in the field of forensic science. Police found that David's account of the night before Nicole's disappearance did not seem convincing. Additionally, police noted that only David and Nicole's DNA and fingerprints were found in her car. If strangers had been in the car, their fingerprints would still be there because they had not been erased. If the criminal had tried to erase the fingerprints, there would have been no fingerprints left. The driver's seat was adjusted to fit David's size, and surveillance footage from a gas station captured a person resembling him. After Nicole went missing, he used her cell phone to make multiple calls from various locations around the city. Police believed he was trying to throw the investigation off track. However, modern tracking technology allowed them to pinpoint the exact location of the calls, proving that Nicole could not have been there at the time because she was dead. Notably, both Nicole's and her husband's phones worked in the same areas. Strangulation, the method of murder, usually indicates a personal connection between the killer and the victim. Evidence found at the crime scene indicated that the killer was someone close to Nicole. This is consistent with the fact that she was not sexually assaulted. The medical examiner determined Nicole's time of death. It was found that she was killed at night or early in the morning while still in bed. Her limbs were clean, with no signs of struggle. Forensic experts determined the time of death by examining Nicole's stomach contents. They found that the food Nicole had eaten the night before was still undigested, suggesting that she had been murdered before she got up to go to work the next morning. Although they appeared to be a loving couple, it was clear that this was just a cover, and there were multiple reasons behind the crime. At the time, the family was facing serious financial difficulties. David is quite the party animal. He enjoys drinking and smoking marijuana, which puts a dent in the family budget. Nicole spent a lot of time and effort dealing with her addiction and had been trying to stay sober for years. David was jealous of his wife's strength. He also had affairs, and during the investigation, it was discovered that he had had at least 4 affairs. His lifestyle meant that he often pressured his wife into having sex. He even tried to drug her at a club to convince her, but she refused. This made him angry. He often met women at clubs, which led to sexual encounters. Just days after Nicole went missing, he began seeking new relationships. By the time he was arrested, David had remarried and had a child. This was especially painful for Nicole's parents, as their daughter had always wanted children. But David had no interest in that. Furthermore, David quickly began collecting documents to claim Nicole's life insurance. After gathering all the information, David was called in for questioning. At the police station, he denied any involvement in the murder. When asked to take a lie detector test, he agreed, but the results showed that he had lied. He was eventually arrested and charged with murder, but David firmly denied any involvement in the crime. The trial started in September 2013, 7 years after Nicole passed away. Her family and friends gathered in the courthouse, hoping for justice. The defense lawyer for the David argued that Nicole's death was linked to her relapsed alcohol addiction and possibly a new addiction to prescription drugs. He pointed to an empty pill bottle found during a search of the bathroom as evidence of this. And the defense insisted that all the evidence against David was circumstantial and that the case was based on speculation. Nicole's parents testified in court that David did not participate in the search efforts, did not help distribute flyers, and only pretended to be upset. Nicole's mother explained that the medication in question was a prescription painkiller prescribed to her daughter to treat severe abdominal pain caused by her endometriosis, which had significantly improved her condition. Prosecutors were unable to prove intentional conduct, so David Pitts was charged with second-degree murder. David was sentenced to 18 years and 4 months in prison, the maximum sentence under state law. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Honey and Barry Sherman. The murder of Honey and Barry Sherman is one of the most baffling crimes in history. On a cold December morning, Canadian billionaire businessman Barry and his wife Honey were found dead in their mansion, hanging from a railing near their indoor pool. The shocking discovery led to an investigation that revealed unexpected twists and turns. Barry Sherman was born in 1942 in Toronto, Canada. His father ran a small business but passed away from heart failure when Barry was just 10 years old. From a young age, Barry demonstrated exceptional intelligence, setting him apart from his peers. In the early 1960s, he studied engineering at the University of Toronto. During the summer, he worked part-time as a truck driver, delivering drugs for the pharmaceutical company Empire, which was owned by his uncle, Louis Winter. Barry later earned his PhD and BA in astrophysics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1967. In his unfinished autobiography, Barry said that these early years were crucial in shaping his future. His uncle, Louis Winter, a pharmaceutical company owner, and his wife Beverly both died young, just 17 days apart, in 1965. Louis suffered from psychosis, while Beverly battled leukemia, leaving behind 4 young sons. Initially, Barry occasionally visited his young cousins, but eventually lost contact with them. At that time, Barry was only 22 years old, but he confidently declared to the real estate manager at the time that he wanted to become the head of the Empire Pharmaceutical Company. He offered $3,000 and a car. Barry demanded a response within 24 hours or he would withdraw his offer. The trustee rejected his bold proposal, but Barry was not deterred. 2 years after graduation, he made another attempt to gain control of the company, this time proposing a partnership with a formal offer of $450,000. The trustee considered selling the company, but wanted to ensure that Louis's 4 sons would be protected in the deal. However, Barry was only willing to put together a written agreement that would allow his cousins to work at Empire when they turned 21 and purchase up to a 5% stake when they turned 23, as long as he still owned the business. If he sold the company, the agreement would be void. Despite their concerns, the deal went ahead, but protections for Louis's sons were not included in the final agreement. Barry ultimately sold the company for nearly $2 million, and after gaining experience from this venture, Barry was ready to start his next venture, starting his own pharmaceutical company, Texas. He founded the company in 1974 as a conglomerate that would compete with global market leaders such as Pfizer and Bayer. The company produced generic drugs, which are essentially replicas of well-known medications. Barry portrayed himself as a champion for consumers, boldly suing major pharmaceutical companies to make medications affordable for patients in need. Barry married Honey in 1971. They met in 1970 when Honey was volunteering at a local hospital, raising funds for charities and participating in Toronto's Jewish community. Helping others was very important to her since she was born in an Austrian displaced persons camp, and her parents survived the Holocaust. Years later, Barry decided to help his cousins, Louis's children, after discovering that they had struggled with drug problems as teenagers. After 16 years of separation, Barry reconnected with them, providing them with a car, a house, and financial support. However, Barry's wife, Honey, was not happy with this new relationship. She frequently questioned Barry about what his cousins asked for and how much money he gave them. This frustration caused her to scold Carrie Winter, causing him to leave. Why was Barry so generous to his cousins? Carrie started to wonder if there was a hidden motive behind Barry's help. One day, Carrie confronted Barry and directly asked how he acquired their father's business. Barry dodged the question, but Carrie persisted. He began searching through family archives and discovered an agreement that shocked him. making him believe that Barry had deceived their family. Barry had never mentioned it to him or to the other brothers. Carrie later called Barry to express his concerns, and Barry confirmed the truth of Carrie's findings. This revelation caused a lasting rift between them and Barry. Barry was actively involved in charity work alongside his wife, Honey. They donated over $50 million, including significant contributions to the Jewish community and the Toronto Hospital, as well as supplies to areas affected by disasters. His company employed around 11,000 people and operated in over 100 countries worldwide. The couple had 4 adult children and several grandchildren. In 2017, they decided to sell their mansion, which was over 1,100 square meters, for nearly $7 million Canadian dollars. They intended to build their dream home closer to downtown Toronto, but those plans never materialized. At 8:30 a.m. on December 15, 2017, a cleaning crew entered the couple's home and began cleaning the house before it was put on sale. Around 10 a.m., 2 real estate agents arrived at the house with potential buyers to inspect the property. They first inspected the main levels of the house and then went to the basement, where the swimming pool was located. A real estate agent entered the pool area first and saw the bodies of Barry, 75, and Honey, 70. After realizing they were dead, she quickly ordered the buyers to leave, telling them that the owner was supposed to be doing yoga. Before taking the potential clients upstairs to view the home, the employee asked the maid to check the basement and see what was going on. The maid went down into the basement, approached the couple, and found them cold. She returned a few minutes later and informed the employee of her findings. The employee then said goodbye to the clients and went downstairs to confirm that Barry and Honey were indeed dead before calling the police. When police paramedics arrived, they confirmed that the couple were dead. Barry and Honey had been dead for approximately 36 hours at the time of discovery. Barry was discovered sitting on the right side with his legs crossed and his glasses correctly positioned on his face. He had some neck wounds, but no other injuries were found on his body. Honey had a bruise on her face, and Barry was located near the garage door. On the other side of the garage, there was vodka, which they often kept there, and one of the room's windows was opened about 15 centimeters for ventilation because the room had recently been painted. Both Barry and Honey had leather straps tightly wrapped around their necks, which were attached to stainless steel pool railings installed about a meter above the floor. The cause of death for both was determined to be strangulation. Initially, the police suspected that the couple had chosen to end their lives, but there seemed to be no reason for such a tragic decision. They were wealthy, had a thriving business, and were in love. A family member mentioned that Barry had complained of fatigue, blaming it on long hours of work and poor nutrition. However, Barry had never shown any signs of depression, making it difficult to believe that he would take such drastic action. Honey had recently been treated for throat cancer and was battling severe arthritis, having had knee and hip replacements. Despite her health problems, she never complained, was sociable and friendly, always maintained a positive attitude, and showed no signs of end-her-own-life tendencies. After a detailed examination of the crime scene, the police began to investigate the possibility that the husband killed Honey before taking his own life. They identified the victim as Honey based on injuries to her face. Both victims had marks on their wrists indicating their hands had been bound together. Autopsies found no traces of illegal substances or alcohol that could have contributed to their deaths. In Barry's basement, there is a sculpture made entirely from trash. The artist deliberately used discarded materials to create this piece, which depicts 2 human figures. After the bodies were discovered, some speculated that the killer may have been inspired by this sculpture, as the bodies were placed in similar positions. The day after the bodies were found, some unnamed police officers told the media that Barry had strangled his wife, Honey, before taking her life. This was never verified and was quickly dismissed by family members, who said it was untrue, especially given the close relationship between the couple. Within 72 hours of the incident, their 4 adult children hired prominent criminal defense attorney Brian Greenspan. He assembled a team to conduct an independent investigation, including detectives and an expert who performed a second autopsy on the victims. They believe that Barry and Honey were murdered. The couple had died just a few days before they were scheduled to leave for a vacation at their home in Palm Beach, Florida. Honey had organized a 4-week trip that was meant to begin on December 18th. Barry was meant to join Honey a week later on the 25th. Unlike Honey, he wasn't in a rush. Work took priority over a vacation in Florida. When examining the couple's position when they died, they were sitting on the floor, their backs to the pool, their jackets thrown back. The glasses on the bar appeared to have been adjusted by someone, raising questions, as did the Barry's crossed legs. It appeared that someone had assisted them in their final moments. Barry's family released a statement calling on the police to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation into the deaths and asking the media to stop speculating about the cause. During this time, a serial killer was also active in Toronto, diverting police resources to catch him. As a result, the investigation into Barry and Honey's case was not a priority. The couple's autopsies were performed by a rookie forensic expert who had never worked on such a complex case before and was unable to provide any conclusive answers. However, after Bruce MacArthur was arrested, police began working on Barry's case and interviewed around 240 people. With such a large group, it seemed like the case would be solved quickly. Unfortunately, that was not to be. The latest known events before the couple's death were remarkable. On December 12, 2017, Honey was absent from a charity board meeting, which was unusual for her as she had never been absent from such meetings before. The following day, December 13th, Barry and Honey met at Apotex's headquarters to discuss plans for their new home. Barry often made work calls at night because he had trouble sleeping, which changed his working hours. However, on the evening of December 13th, he did not make a phone call, which was unusual for him. Barry was scheduled to appear at the Apotex office on December 14th, but he did not show up or notify anyone of his absence, which is highly unusual. Toronto police, who have been criticized by Barry's family for their previous handling of the case, have refused to make any public statements. Police have not been looking for a suspect because there was no evidence of a forced entry into the home or any signs of outsiders, prompting theories that people close to them were involved. An independent investigation revealed that Barry's cousins were suspects. They were unhappy that Barry had lied to them and left them without money. For 10 years, they had been involved in a lawsuit over a portion of Barry's pharmaceutical fortune. They argued that Barry had founded his pharmaceutical company at the expense of his father's company, Empire, and they demanded their share of Apotex. Barry denied all allegations and fought tooth and nail, insisting that his cousins return the millions of dollars he had given them. Finally, in the 1980s, Barry did everything he could to support them. On September 15, 2017, 3 months earlier, Barry and Honey were found dead, and an Ontario judge ruled in Barry's favor, dismissing the cousins' claims and describing their lawsuit as unrealistic and overly ambitious. On December 6, just a week before Barry was last seen alive, a judge ordered Barry's cousins to pay $300,000 in attorney fees. Barry was unhappy with the amount, as he was asking for nearly $1 million. After the ruling, Barry brought in his attorneys to appeal the decision. They filed their appeal the day after his funeral. Due to the ongoing conflict with the cousins, many began to suspect their involvement in the couple's murder. One of the cousins, Kerry Winter, even mentioned in an interview that he had fantasized about ambushing Barry at work and harming him. Kerry was not surprised by the tragedy that occurred. He believed that Barry had killed his wife, Honey, and then taken his own life. In several interviews, Kerry mentioned that years ago, Barry approached him with a disturbing request. Barry is said to have told Carrie that he wanted Carrie to do him a favor and kill his wife. Carrie responded in disbelief, "Are you serious, Barry?" Barry said, yes, he hated her. Carrie insisted that he would not commit such an act but mentioned that he might know people who could. However, when Carrie was about to help Barry out of gratitude for his past support, Barry suddenly changed his mind and rejected the idea. Barry's family later strongly denied Carrie's claims, asserting that Barry would never ask his cousin to do something so extreme, as he loved Honey very much and would never think of harming her. Carrie claimed that he had nothing to do with the murder. He admitted that he felt great contempt and hatred for Barry because Barry hurt him and disrespected his father. Carrie had every reason to dislike Barry, but he had nothing to do with Barry's death. Carrie mentioned that on the day of the murder, he had been at work all day. In the evening, he attended a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, then returned home as usual, watched a movie, ate, and went to bed. The next morning, he went to work as usual. However, since he lived alone, no one could verify his statement. 3 years later, in November 2020, police announced that they had a suspect, but just 2 days later, they announced that there may be multiple suspects. There has been no further clarification since. A year later, in December 2021, police released surveillance footage near Barry's home. The videos showed a person wearing dark clothing walking on the sidewalk near Barry and Honey's home. Police observed that the person had an unusual gait, possibly due to walking in the snow. The time of the murder coincided with the time this stranger was seen walking toward the couple's home. The man in the footage was never identified because his face and identifying features were not visible. The only detail identified from the surveillance camera footage was his height, estimated to be around 170 to 180 centimeters. Police hoped that by sharing the video with the public, someone might recognize the man, but no one came forward to help police identify the suspect. According to police, Honey arrived home in her Lexus at around 8:30 p.m. on December 13th. She parked as usual and entered the kitchen through the laundry room door. The intruders may have entered the home. Honey then went into the bathroom, where she was either attacked or fled after the attack began. This would explain why her phone was found in the bathroom by a maid. Honey was beaten and strangled on the first floor before her body was moved to the basement. An independent medical examiner determined that Honey's facial injuries occurred as a result of being dragged down the stairs to the pool, but it was never determined which of the 2 staircases in the home was used. One theory is that the attacker encountered Honey and attacked her on the street, then used her keys to get into the house. This would explain why there were no signs of entry. Another possibility is that he entered through an open window or unlocked door. Barry left Apotex around 8:30 p.m. in his Mustang. After reaching home, he parked in the garage, which provided him access to the house through 2 doors. It's likely he used the door near the stairs, where he was attacked. This could clarify why his documents and gloves were discovered in the garage area. The killers placed the victims' bodies near the basement pool. They wrapped belts around their necks, draped jackets over their shoulders, and left glasses on the bar to make it look like to end one's own life. It was discovered that the leather belts used were taken from the victims' homes. This suggests that the criminals intended to fool the investigation into the fact that no outsiders were involved. And Barry was behind the setup. It was learned through investigation that Barry, despite keeping a tight rein on his wife's spending, but had generously given millions of dollars to his children. Although he was reluctant to spend money on himself or his wife, he was more than willing to financially support his children. Honey had the means to travel and shop. She could easily spend large amounts on home repairs and other essentials. However, she and her husband preferred not to spend much money. Before her death, Honey mentioned to relatives that her husband wanted to buy her an expensive gift, but she didn't know what it would be. despite Barry's considerable wealth. He preferred to drive everyday cars. He owned a Mustang, and the couple never owned the luxury cars typically flaunted by billionaires. For his 50th birthday, Honey bought Barry a sports car and presented it to him in front of close family, but he was unhappy with the gift and insisted that she return it because he disliked extravagance. The Barry did not flaunt their wealth. Their home was modest for billionaires, and they were careful with their spending. They led a relatively simple lifestyle, often flying economy class. Honey enjoyed a few luxuries typical of the upper middle class, like beautiful jewelry, a Lexus SUV, and shopping trips in New York. In November 2016, she bought a valuable piece of land in the upscale Forest Hill neighborhood, which was registered in her name. They planned to demolish the existing house and a new one. The plans included a large brick and stone residence with an elevator and the outdoor pool that Barry promised her, complete with a retractable skylight and a separate pool. The building plans received approval on June 28, just under 6 months before the murder. Barry did not really want to move to a new home. He was happy with their current home but made the decision based on Honey's wishes. On November 27, 2017, just 2 weeks before the tragedy, their home was put up for sale and described as a modern architectural masterpiece. It is unclear why the Barry family chose to sell their home when construction on the new home had not even begun. In the final weeks of Honey's life, she was busy with her charity work while also overseeing the home project. In late November, she received the Senate Medal for 150th Anniversary Volunteer Service Award, presented by her close friend, Senator from. She was recognized as the best charity worker and fundraiser in Toronto. Barry supported Honey throughout their 46 years of marriage. The couple demonstrated a striking contrast. Honey was outgoing, cheerful, and social, while Barry preferred a more reserved and introverted approach, often uninterested in small talk. Although Honey did not have a formal job, she served as an exceptional ambassador for Apotex. Honey excelled at building connections with influential people through her charm and determination to assist others. In her final days, friends and family noted that Barry and Honey appeared happy and in good spirits, showing no signs of being threatened or in danger. Barry frequently filed lawsuits against competitors and the government. Over the course of his career, he initiated approximately 1,200 lawsuits, including 83 against Health Canada, using these actions as leverage. His substantial donations to various foundations helped him gain support from politicians. Barry was known as the most active defendant in Canada. Those close to him said that his love of litigation stemmed not from a desire for money, but from a need for validation and a determination to win at all costs. Another theory that may have something to do with the couple's deaths is Barry's questionable business practices. He was known to be mysterious and owed around $1 billion to various companies, which he never intended to repay. His investments outside of Apotex were large and obscure, including a failed casino venture, a money-losing gold mine, a bankrupt jewelry business, and an investment in a non-existent yacht. He also financed B-movies featuring gangsters and vampires and worked with people who were later convicted of fraud. Barry amassed a large fortune through unethical means. While some considered him generous and kind, many others criticized his character, claiming that he lacked positive qualities. Given his character, many people would have wanted to harm him. There were suspicions about his business partners at Apotex who may have had motives related to a business dispute, but no solid evidence has been presented. In the final months of his life, Barry suffered a setback. In January 2017, Apotex sued a former employee, accusing him of stealing drug formulas to start his own pharmaceutical company in Pakistan. A few months later, a key executive at Apotex was accused of espionage by its biggest competitor, an Israeli company, implying that a former female employee had leaked confidential information to her boyfriend at Apotex. In the weeks leading up to his death, Barry continued to work hard, always focused on his business. Barry suffered from insomnia and was constantly busy with calculations and planning. He even wanted to discuss business matters while on vacation. Barry was a man who trusted his instincts and was willing to take risks. He was a popular figure in society, and many people came to him for financial help. Police now believe that Barry's murders may have been related to his personality and lifestyle. He often made life difficult for others and was quick to sue anyone. The police suspect that the killer was likely an unknown person who either visited Barry's home or hired a hitman. Honey was not the intended target. She became an accidental victim because she encountered the criminal at the murder scene. After the murder, the unknown criminal remained in the house with the bodies for an extended period, indicating he was familiar with the family's daily routine and had ample time to carry out his actions without being disturbed. He meticulously cleaned up any evidence of his presence and positioned the bodies to resemble the unusual garbage sculpture found in the house. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attended the funeral of the Sherman couple and posthumously awarded Barry one of the nation's highest civilian honors. Approximately 6,500 people attended the funeral. An independent investigation team, led by a lawyer and supported by the victims' families, offered a $35 million reward for information that could lead to the arrest of the perpetrator, but this effort was unsuccessful. The lawyers discovered that the police failed to thoroughly examine the crime scene. Notably, they found jewelry on the driveway near the house that did not belong to the victims. But the police overlooked it and may have missed other crucial evidence that could have been lost over time. Evidence may have been destroyed by real estate staff and buyers who inspected the house, as well as cleaning crews who were present at the time. The police received a total of 343 tips from the legal team, but none of them led to the identification of the criminal. The last tip came on July 2, 2019. For unknown reasons, the legal team did not provide any information for more than a year, possibly due to a lack of new leads. In February 2019, the murdered couple's home was returned to their family. The couple's children then filed a petition to demolish the house, saying it was heartbreaking to see the house in its current state and that no one would want to buy it. As a result, the house was demolished. After the house was demolished, the family aimed to clean up the area, fill in the pool, and put the land up for sale. It is unclear if it has been sold yet. Barry has faced numerous death threats, including from his competitors. Notably, Barry had no protection whatsoever. Every evening, he would enter the office and get into his car, making it easy for someone to attack him. To this day, the case remains unsolved, with only 2 investigators still working on it. They are looking at all potential suspects from the large list of defendants in related lawsuits and are also looking into the company's financial records and charity documents. However, some believe that influential figures in society are involved, which could mean the case will never be solved. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Joel Shanbrum. Joel Shanbrum grew up in the town of Northridge, California. He met his future wife, Jennifer, while working as a DJ at a club. They quickly formed a close relationship and began dating. Many people are jealous because their relationship looks so perfect and their happiness radiates to everyone around them. Both sets of parents supported their relationship enthusiastically. Their delightful relationship eventually led to marriage. Jennifer and Joel married in 1991, and she moved to Los Angeles. Joel aspired to be a police officer, so he joined the police academy and, by 1993, was employed by the Los Angeles law enforcement agencies. Joel was dedicated to his job, especially overseeing troubled teenagers, and took pride in helping others. They later had a son named Jacob, and the family seemed to be living the perfect life. Although on the outside the family looked happy, but inside they hide dark secrets, which eventually lead to tragedy. On March 18, 1998, Jennifer's mother, Diane Bates, who lived with them, called 911. She returned home in the evening and found Joel lying motionless on the living room couch. He showed no signs of life and was bleeding. When the police arrived, she met them outside, she too afraid to go back inside. She suggested to the officers that Joel might have taken end his own life. The police reassured her and entered the house. Upon examining the body in the scene, it became clear that it was a murder. Joel had been shot 3 times in the head, and there was no gun nearby. The medics confirmed Joel's death, and his body was sent for a forensic examination. The police quickly identified the murdered man as their colleague, 32 years old Joel Shanbrum. Joel is known to be a meek, calm person who dislikes conflict, so he seems to have no enemies. As they examined the rest of the house, they discovered that the entire upper floor had been ransacked, with drawers pulled out and clothes scattered everywhere. This suggested a robbery, leading investigators to suspect that Joel was killed during a botched burglary. While inspecting the house, the police heard a noise coming from the second-floor bathroom. They attempted to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. The officers asked for the door to be opened. From behind the door, they heard a frightened woman's voice, saying she didn't believe they were really the police. An officer then slid his badge under the door, and it was unlocked. Inside, they found 28-year-old Jennifer, the wife of Joel, and Jacob, their 3-year-old son. Both were visibly shaking with fear. The detectives took Jennifer aside for questioning. According to Jennifer, at around 7 p.m., she went to the bathroom to bathe Jacob. Then, she heard some noise downstairs, but she thought her husband was doing something. Then, as they stepped outside, they heard gunshots. Scared, she and Jacob ran back into the bathroom, closed the door, and hid to avoid being noticed. She also heard intruders moving through the house, throwing things around and talking about their loot. She realized they were thieves who had broken into the house, and her husband had accidentally encountered them, so they decided to eliminate him. She and Jacob remained hidden in the bathroom for over 2 hours until the police arrived. She was grateful that the robbers did not find them and that they were unharmed. When she asked the police about her husband, they informed her he had died. Jennifer, Jacob, and Diana were taken to the police station to provide detailed testimonies. Jennifer repeated her account, which sounded plausible and convincing. Jacob was too young to be questioned. Investigators believed the story that Joel was killed by robbers. Diana explained that when she saw Joel bleeding on the couch, she panicked and ran out of the house, driven by shock and fear. In her fright, she did not think to check on Jennifer and Jacob but just wait for the police outside. After their statements, the police allowed Jennifer, Diane, and Jacob to return home while they began investigating the robbery. At that time in the area, there had been several robberies, which supported Jennifer's story about the robbers. However, there were some inconsistencies. Previously, the robbers hadn't killed anyone. They followed a clear pattern, breaking into only empty houses late at night, which allowed them to remain unnoticed and difficult to get caught. It was odd that the robbers suddenly changed their tactics and broke into a house where many people lived, especially when everyone was home and the lights were on. Why would they attempt such a bold robbery? The Shanbrum family was considered middle class and not wealthy enough to attract the attention of thieves. Furthermore, after inspection, it was found that jewelry, money, electronics, and other valuables were not missing, even those in plain sight. There were no signs of forced entry or any evidence of strangers. No outsiders' fingerprints or DNA were found in the house. The neighbors also didn't notice anything unusual. They heard gunshots and looked out the windows but didn't see anyone leaving the house. Everything looked so strange. The next day, Jennifer was called to the police station for questioning again. She appeared very upset and repeated the same story, but this time added that she heard her husband, Joel, trying to fight back. He told the intruders that he was a police officer and they made a big mistake breaking into his house. Jennifer also mentioned that after she and Jacob ran into the bathroom, she heard 2 more shots. The detectives also interviewed Diane. They asked her to recount in detail what she had done on the day of the murder. She said she was off work that day. She left home at noon to go to the cinema, then went shopping, and had dinner at a cafe. Meanwhile, Joel, Jennifer, and Jacob were at home all evening. Then, she returned home and found Joel murdered on the couch. She noted an unusual detail: the living room blinds were closed, which was not typical for their family, because they often opened the curtains even at night. She believed the robbers had closed the blinds. The detectives found nothing suspicious in Diane's account and sent her home, they continuing their investigation. However, the police sensed something was amiss. On March 20th, the autopsy report for Joel was released. It revealed that all 3 shots were fired at close range. The first shot resulted in a superficial wound to the back of the head, the second hit him in the cheek, and the third struck him in the eye, penetrating the skull, caused death. A brain examination showed that Joel was shot with 2 types of weapons, 2 shots from a pistol and 1 from a .410 caliber weapon, which is rare. This could be a crucial clue in the investigation. Joel's time of death was determined to be between 8 and 9 o'clock in the evening, contradicting Jennifer's claim that he was shot at 7 p.m. Additionally, the medical examiner discovered that Joel was shot while asleep. During the crime scene examination, forensic experts concluded that there was little blood spatter around the body. If Joel had resisted and been shot while moving, there would have been more blood spatter. This finding contradicted Jennifer's testimony, where she claimed that she heard Joel say he was a police officer while arguing with the assailants. This was clearly a lie, causing detectives to investigate more thoroughly the Shambram family's relationship. Investigators spoke to people close to the family and discovers that Joel and Jennifer's relationship is not as perfect as it appears. There has been a serious conflict between them for a long time. They frequently quarreled, mainly over financial issues, and some believed that they were heading towards divorce. Joel's sister mentioned that Joel, besides working as a police officer, held 2 additional jobs to support his family. He wants his wife and children to have a prosperous life. The family rented the house they are living in after their previous home was foreclosed on by the bank. Jennifer, Joel's wife, did not work outside the home. She was a housewife, taking care of their child and managing household chores. Even though Joel tried hard, but they still had financial difficulties, and Jennifer's desires for a nicer house and a more expensive car added pressure. Joel loves Jennifer very much and was willing to do anything for her. He worked 3 jobs at once to meet her needs, but he couldn't manage a 4th job. The financial strain led to arguments. Joel, in hopes of saving their marriage, suggested they try marriage counseling, but Jennifer refused. When Joel got a managerial position at an insurance company, Jennifer wanted to work there too. It was at this company that they met Matthew Fletcher, and they quickly became best friends. Over time, Joel began to suspect that Jennifer and Matthew were having an affair. Eventually, Jennifer left her job, she feeling exhausted, and returned to being a housewife, but she continued to stay in touch with Matthew. Joel suspected his wife of having an affair, which led him to consider divorce. Because of his son, he doesn't want to divorce, but by 1997, he was exhausted by their strained relationship. He confided in his sister about his decision to divorce his wife and was determined to pursue custody of his son. However, this was his last conversation with his sister. On March 23, 1998, Joel was buried. At the funeral, Jennifer and Matthew attended together and they appeared unemotional, which upset his relatives. Later, detectives discovered that she and Matthew had gone to a hotel after the funeral, taking champagne and celebrating there overnight. Detectives at the funeral, who noted she and Matthew's odd behavior, decided to follow them. The plainclothes police had been monitoring Jennifer for a long time and noticed her daily contact with Matthew. Sometimes they spent the night together, shows that they have a romantic relationship with each other. Meanwhile, Joel's relatives suspected Jennifer of being involved in her husband's murder. A week after Joel's death, Matthew was summoned for questioning at the police station. Jennifer and Matthew arrived together but denied having an affair, despite their pager messages indicating otherwise, as they exchanged numerous love messages. They were interrogated separately. Matthew was asked about his whereabouts at the time of the murder. He claimed that at 7 p.m., he visited a client's home in the San Fernando Valley to handle an insurance policy and then went to see his sister at the hospital where she worked. The police began verifying his alibi. Some parts were confirmed, but they couldn't determine where Matthew was between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. Despite suspicions, there was no concrete evidence against Jennifer and Matthew, so they were released. Detectives continued to gather information about them. On April 27, researchers discovered that Joel had 3 life insurance policies totaling more than $1 million. The first was for $300,000 and he had obtained it while working as a police officer. The second was for $500,000, contract was paused and then reinstated shortly before the tragedy. There was also a $314,000 policy that Joel didn't even know about. He had been insured for one of his other jobs. After her death, Jennifer immediately went to the insurance companies to request the payments. The situation became more grim, as money, especially large amounts of money, is often a motive for crime. Under the second insurance policy worth $500,000, several issues emerged. Joel initially issued this policy himself but later decided he didn't need it and canceled it. 2 months before the tragedy, the policy was reopened with a signature at an office in Atlanta, Georgia. However, his sister was convinced that he didn't do this. She believed he had intentionally suspended the policy and questioned why he would reactivate it, especially given his busy schedule with 3 jobs, leaving him little time for lunch, let alone trips to another city. The detective discovered that Joel was not in Atlanta at that time, and the signature on the documents was fake. The investigation revealed that his wife Jennifer and her lover Matthew orchestrated this scheme. They traveled to Atlanta, went to the insurance company's head office, and forged Joel's signature on the policy. This suggested that their actions were premeditated. Although the evidence was circumstantial, but investigators continued to gather more information against they. Investigators interviewed witnesses, friends, relatives, co-workers of the Shanbrum family, and thoroughly examined the case materials to find evidence to incriminate Jennifer and Matthew. 6 months after Joel's death, Jennifer received $614,000 from 2 of his life insurance policies. Although the largest policy, worth $500,000, was initially denied due to a forged signature, but it didn't seem to make Jennifer and Matthew angry. Jennifer deposited the money into Matthew's account. They began dating officially in June 1998 and soon made their relationship public. She and Matthew took a romantic trip to Mexico, got engaged, and married on Valentine's Day, February 14, 1999, in Hawaii, just 4 days before the anniversary of Joel's death. Jennifer and Matthew lived extravagantly, spent insurance money on buying a car. Joel's family was completely surprised by Jennifer's sudden change. They were confused and didn't understand why she was acting like that. There was something wrong with her behavior. She continues to enjoy life to the fullest, remarried, and prepared for motherhood. Most importantly, they couldn't believe that she had gotten away with Joel's murder, from which she had profited. Despite the passage of time, but the police still lacked sufficient evidence to charge Jennifer and Matthew. After Jennifer and Matthew's child was born, they began living a very private life. They rarely appeared in public and interacted with only a few people. In 2002, detectives revisited the case. They believed Diane was dishonest in her testimony. Over the years, her testimony was inconsistent, with her story changing multiple times. There was also a gap in time between when she found Joel and when she called 911. This left investigators uncertain about what happened in the house during that time and what she was doing. Her behavior appeared suspicious to the investigators. The detectives called Diane in for questioning again. She continued to deny any involvement in the crime. Investigators offered her immunity from prosecution. They promised that if she testified truthfully before a grand jury, she would not be charged with any crime related to Joel's death. Despite this offer, she still disagrees. Diane eventually succumbed to police pressure and confessed that her daughter Jennifer had been in a romantic relationship with Matthew. They planned to kill Joel, and Diane was sent out for a walk that day to prevent her from interfering. She felt she had no choice but to comply. Diane also revealed that Jennifer had always dreamed of wealth, but Joel couldn't give her that. When Jennifer met Matthew, he enticed her with promises of riches, and she became influenced by his ideas. Diane found him to be a manipulator who controlled Jennifer and held him responsible for everything. Jennifer was highly skilled with firearms, she frequently practiced shooting, and owned a pistol. Matthew also had a shotgun. After Joel's murder, both the pistols and the shotgun vanished and was never found. Detectives believe Jennifer fired 2 shots at Joel with her pistol, while Matthew fired the final shot with the shotgun. Based on Diana's confession and the circumstantial evidence, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jennifer. Matthew was also arrested, and both were charged with the first-degree murder of Joel. At the time, Jennifer was pregnant with Matthew's second child, and then she gave birth in prison while awaiting trial. Her sister took custody of her 3 children. The trial began in March 2004. Matthew, confident due to his legal education, chose to represent himself, while Jennifer had a lawyer. They were tried together. Throughout the trial, Matthew and Jennifer appeared unconcerned. They were often seen talking and laughing with each other, as if they were not paying attention to the seriousness of the proceedings. They confident that the lack of physical evidence would lead to their acquittal, and they will not be held responsible for Joel's death. It was also revealed during the trial that Matthew hadn't divorced his previous wife, adding another charge against him. The prosecution is facing difficulties due to the lack of physical evidence such as DNA, fingerprints, weapons, and there were no other witnesses but Diane. They argued that Matthew and Jennifer had killed Joel in cold blood, with money as their primary motive. According to the prosecution, on the night of the murder, while Joel slept on the couch in the living room, she and Matthew executed their plan. She supposedly fired the first 2 shots with a pistol, and Matthew delivered a final shot with a shotgun. This occurred while Jacob was upstairs taking a bath. Afterward, they staged a robbery on the 2nd floor, took the weapon, left the house, and disposed of it. Jennifer then locked herself and Jacob in the bathroom until the police arrived. Matthew and Jennifer denied their guilt during the trial, claiming they had an alibi. Jennifer said she was hiding in the bathroom with Jacob, while Matthew was at a business meeting and then visited his sister. However, their alibi was not strong and was considered controversial. Then, the prosecutor highlighting key points, the house door was closed with no signs of forced entry, and since Joel was asleep, the door had to have been opened by someone already inside. This implicated Jennifer and Matthew. Diane, as part of a deal for immunity, testified against Matthew. While reviewing crime scene photos, the prosecutor noticed a bottle of water in the shower stall with the light on. He pointed this out to the jury, suggesting Jennifer had prepared to wait in the bathroom, indicating premeditation. The jury deliberated for 6 days before concluding that Jennifer and Matthew were guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. Both received life sentences without parole. During sentencing, Matthew and Jennifer supported each other by holding hands and never divorced. Matthew is incarcerated at the California State Penitentiary in Los Angeles, and Jennifer is at the Central California Women's Institution. Despite their imprisonment, they continue to communicate and exchange love letters. All of their appeals were rejected. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Tracy Roberts. In 1998, the Tracy Roberts family relocated from Chicago to the small town of Early, Iowa. The couple, Tracy and Michael, were in their second marriages and each had a son from previous relationships. Tracy was American, while Michael was originally from Australia. They were seen as a respectable young family by the local community. Michael was a computer expert who ran an IT business from home, with many innovative ideas he aimed to pursue. Tracy is an active and sociable housewife who enjoys sports. The couple met online and got married just 18 days after meeting in person. They have since had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and appear to be a very happy family. Many people admired Michael's determination, including his neighbor Mona, a real estate broker with whom they had completed several successful transactions. Mona was eager to continue working with Michael. She said that her 20-year-old son, Dustin, was very private and had a hard time keeping a job. He had tried many different positions but had not been able to hold any for long. Michael suggested that help Dustin discover his strengths. Later, he began teaching Dustin the basics of business. He took him on trips and supported him in attending church. Michael was generally seen as kind, pleasant, and empathetic, while his wife was regarded as sweet and sociable. They raised 3 children together, with Tracy managing the household and children while Michael focused on work, often traveling for business. However, an unexpected situation happened to Tracy's family. On the evening of December 13, 2001, in the town of Early, Tracy was in the kitchen preparing dinner with her children. While the food was being heated, she was also bathing her 1-year-old daughter upstairs. Meanwhile, her 2 older boys, ages 3 and 11, were watching television in the older boy's bedroom. Suddenly, the boys were startled by a piercing scream from their mother. The eldest, Bert, rushed to see what was happening. He saw Tracy trying to enter the room, but someone grabbed her by the hair and pulled her back into the hallway. Holding her baby daughter, Tracy managed to hand her over to Bert before a struggle with the attacker ensued. Tracy slammed the door shut behind her, and the boys could hear the sounds of a struggle and their mother's muffled cries for help. Terrified and unsure of what to do, Bert listened as the noises escalated. Then, after a brief silence, a shot rang out. During the attack, Tracy managed to defend herself against the criminals. One was killed, and the other escaped. Bert called 911 around 7 p.m., reporting that strangers had broken into their home and attacked his mother. Police officers took the call seriously and rushed to the address. It was unclear what had happened to Tracy and her 3 children at that time. Paramedics then arrived to find the children sobbing and Tracy repeatedly shouting that an intruder was still upstairs and pointing towards the stairs. However, as per protocol, paramedics could not enter the house until police had confirmed that the house was secure. The police arrived and went up to the 2nd floor where they found a young man lying dead in a pool of blood. There was no one else in the room. Tracy was quickly placed in an ambulance by a doctor and taken to the nearest medical center. The scene revealed a shocking crime. The entire family was overwhelmed and confused by the situation. The police began an investigation to shed light on this complicated situation. The small town where the incident occurred was a quiet and peaceful community of about 500 residents, all of whom knew each other well. The police began their investigation by questioning Bert, the eldest son. Bert had witnessed an attack on his mother. The attacker had pulled her hair back. Stunned, the boy knew he had to act to protect himself and the other children, so he grabbed a baseball bat, ready to fight off anyone who entered his room. When the chaos died down, he could only hear his mother breathing heavily. Finally, he heard the voices of two men outside starting to bang on the door. In fear, the boy began to scream, trying to scare the intruders away. Outside, the men shouted about having guns, and then several shots were fired. Suddenly, his mother opened the door. Bert was relieved that it was finally over. He then called 911. After hearing about the incident, Mona rushed to the scene. She was looking for her 20-year-old son, Dustin, a family friend. His car was parked in a private driveway, but when she arrived, the entire area, including Dustin's car, was cordoned off. She was not allowed into Tracy's house. Mona asked the officers about her son's condition, but they told her that he was dead. Dustin was found lying in a pool of blood near a second-floor bedroom. Tracy had shot him during a struggle. The police did not share any further information with Mona. Tracy woke up in a hospital 20 kilometers from her home. She had injuries to her neck that suggested she had been strangled. Tracy told the police what had happened that night. While she was bathing her daughter on the second floor, she heard noises downstairs. Thinking that her husband had returned early from a business trip, she went down to check. But she discovered two men. When they started to go upstairs, Tracy quickly took her daughter to Bert's room and left the three children in the room. She then tried to enter the room and close the door, but one of the men grabbed her hair and dragged her into the hallway. Then one of the attackers used her jeans to strangle her. During the struggle, Tracy lost consciousness and the attackers lost focus. When she regained consciousness, she heard screaming outside the door. Realizing this was her chance to escape, she got up and ran to the gun safe next to the bed in the master bedroom. Although the attackers chased her, she managed to turn a few numbers and retrieve a gun. Tracy aimed at them and pulled the trigger, but nothing happened because the safety was still on. The attackers were caught off guard, allowing her to fire again after removing the safety. The loud bang stunned her, and she continued to fire at the attackers until the room filled with smoke. Tracy didn't see the criminals, but she heard someone running away from the house. One of the criminals fell, while the other managed to escape. She also heard her frightened children calling her name, so she rushed into the room and opened the door. In a moment of panic, her son swung a bat at her, trying to protect himself, and she narrowly avoided being hit. The most important thing was that the children were safe. As the smoke cleared in the main bedroom, Tracy saw Dustin, a 20-year-old, lying on the floor but still alive. He began to get up, and in her shock, she grabbed the gun and ordered him to stay down, desperate for everything to stop. She yelled at him not to move, but Dustin, who was the son of her friend Mona, didn't listen. He stood up and approached her. Worried for her and the children's safety, she fired several shots, and Dustin fell to his death. Tracy recounted that earlier that day, Dustin visited their home. When he discovered that her husband was away on a business trip, he lingered on the porch for a long time, seemingly unwilling to leave. His behavior was unusual, and Tracy ultimately had to shut the door in his face. Tracy described a second participant in the crime as tall, with dark hair, around 30 years old, but she never saw his face. That evening, Tracy's husband, Michael, was on a business trip in Minneapolis. It was unclear why Dustin, whom Michael was helping, would attack Tracy and their children. The second killer was still at large, raising fears that he might return for revenge. This left Tracy feeling fearful, she unable to sleep because she was worried about her family's safety. The police had a hard time identifying the second suspect based only on the vague description provided by Tracy. They began investigating Dustin's social connections to determine who might have accompanied him to Tracy's family home. Many people consider Tracy a hero. She gave many interviews to journalists. In front of the cameras, she and her husband, Michael, held hands, and she calmly said that she did what she had to do to protect her family, and the whole hall applauded. Many people thought that her actions were justified. Tracy was brave. She could protect not only herself but also her children. The police were wary of accepting anyone's testimony without evidence, so they began a thorough investigation of the events surrounding the case, finding the story unconvincing. Mona was going through the most difficult time of her life and was heartbroken. To her, the circumstances of her son's murder, as Tracy described them, were meaningless. She was haunted by nightmares of the attack that took her son's life. Mona, the mother of the young man who was shot, spoke to the media about her shock over the incident. She described Dustin as a kind person who had never shown aggression and had no criminal history. There was no reason for him to attack the Tracy family. However, Dustin had to see a psychologist with his mother. He had difficulty making friends at school, was often bullied, and was excluded from parties and celebrations. Despite seeing many doctors, they gave him different diagnoses without clear answers. Could his social difficulties lead to a moment of loss of control? Tracy told the police that she had always feared Dustin. She felt extremely unsafe, even around her husband, and she tried to avoid any encounters with Dustin. Under no circumstances would she let him be alone with the children because she believed he would harm them. Mona was shocked by these allegations. She had no idea that Tracy was facing such serious issues with her son. To Mona, everything seemed just the opposite. The police examined the crime scene and concluded that there was no clear motive for the violent attack. They suggested that it could only make sense if it had been planned as a robbery. The Tracy house contained many valuables, leading Tracy to believe that the young criminals aimed to steal cash or one of Michael's collectible weapons. However, the criminals' behavior did not resemble that of typical robbers. They ignored money and jewelry that were easily visible, and instead of trying to steal from Tracy while she was unconscious after being strangled, they focused solely on inflicting violence without any intent to sexually assault her. The police quickly identified a possible motive linked to Tracy and her husband. Not long before the home invasion, Tracy had experienced a traumatic incident. She was sexually assaulted by a dentist while under anesthesia. She regained consciousness during the assault, and the dentist attempted to silence her by promising to help her with her sexual problems and offering her $150,000 in compensation if she remained quiet. Tracy confided in her husband about this, and he urged her to report it to the police. Just 2 days after the dentist's attack on her, she was preparing to testify in court against her dentist, whom she was accusing of rape. He was likely the second person to invade her home, intending to silence her so she could not testify against him. However, police determined that the dentist had no connection to Dustin and had a solid alibi. He was at work at the time. Later, the Tracy recalled another individual who might have wanted her dead. His name was John Pittman, Tracy's first husband. They met while studying medicine at Northwestern University in Chicago. John was a fourth-year student interning at Chicago Clinical Hospital, and 19-year-old Tracy was in her first year of radiology. John was very controlling and aggressive, but Tracy was accustomed to such behavior after growing up with a domineering father, so she considered it normal. She married him, and they eventually moved to Denver, Colorado, where she gave birth to a son. As John tried to control every aspect of her life, she thought it was normal. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Tracy describes how he often abused her, especially during sex. Eventually, she grew tired of the physical violence, and they divorced. After the divorce, a custody battle began to take place. Bert revealed to his mother that his father had harassed him, leading to a contentious custody battle in court. Although there was no concrete evidence of harassment, Tracy was able to convince those present at the trial. Bert then lived with his mother. However, the long-running custody battle, which was still ongoing when the attack occurred, left John Pittman as a suspect. Even young Bert believed his father may have been involved in the attack. The police contacted John's colleagues in Virginia, where he lived, to confirm whether he had an alibi during the time of the crime. They found that he had a solid alibi. He was working at a clinic when the crime occurred. John denied any involvement and there was no evidence against him. At that time, he was a successful plastic surgeon with an excellent reputation. His acquaintances found it hard to believe that John could harm his son or kill his ex-wife, whom he had not been involved with for a long time. However, John had not been cleared yet and remained a suspect. Months passed without any progress in the case, and Tracy grew increasingly anxious. She felt unsafe knowing that the second attacker was still at large, fearing that he might return to take revenge on her. Meanwhile, the police began investigating the new suspect, Tracy's second husband, Michael. Further investigation revealed that their marriage had long since deteriorated, and the emotional connection between them had faded. Some speculated that Michael may have wanted to get rid of Tracy, a theory that received considerable support from those around them. Bert, Tracy's eldest son, revealed a disturbing truth about his stepfather. The man was very strict and often punished Bert severely for even minor infractions. Meanwhile, Tracy did not address her husband's aggressive behavior or protect her children. It is possible that Tracy had become accustomed to this type of treatment from a young age and did not realize it was a problem. Michael's behavior was noted by the police during a hospital visit where he visited his surviving relatives. His reaction seemed to be genuine shock at finding them still alive, suggesting that this outcome was not what he had wanted. Michael had a strong alibi. He was in another city on business. This was confirmed by CCTV footage. He was later given a lie detector test, but failed it and appeared to be hiding something. The police suspected he may have been involved in planning the attack. He did not inform his wife about the failed lie detector test. Tracy eventually discovered the truth about the lie detector test. Tracy became increasingly paranoid, believing that both her husband and his friend were conspiring against her to gain sole custody of their child. She shared her suspicions with the police chief, citing a dream in which Michael mentioned the plot. Tracy believed that her husband was indeed involved in the case. The police began investigating Michael and discovered that his IT business was struggling and he was in large debt. However, the couple held multi-million-dollar life insurance policies, which may have motivated Michael to eliminate Tracy to solve his financial problems. Additionally, he had a close relationship with Dustin, which may have led him to convince the young man to help him. Despite these theories, there was no concrete evidence linking Michael to any wrongdoing. Tracy and Michael's relationship became increasingly strained. In 2004, 3 years after the attack, they divorced. At the time, police had not found enough evidence to arrest Michael. After the divorce, Tracy and her children moved away. She changed her home, her job, and even her name to escape and protect herself from potential threats. Meanwhile, her friend Mona also moved to another city with her daughters. The tragedy not only affected Dustin's life, but also led to the death of his father a year later. On Thanksgiving Day 2002, Dustin's father chose to end his life at Dustin's grave. The father was devastated by his son's death, especially because of the judgmental looks from others who viewed Dustin as a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, Mona, devastated by a series of losses, could not stop questioning what really happened the day her son arrived at Tracy's house. Mona refused to believe that he intended to hurt the people he admired. Michael's family was important to Dustin. He struggled with social interactions and felt safe and grateful to be with Michael, who understood him. The Mona intended to file a wrongful death lawsuit against Tracy Roberts to hold her accountable for Dustin's death and to uncover what happened that night. Mona lawyers launched their own investigation and discovered inconsistencies in Tracy's repeated accounts of the event. In one version, she claimed to have recognized Dustin immediately, while in another, she said she only learned his identity later. Additionally, she described shooting from different positions in her various retellings. Due to these discrepancies and the confusion surrounding the details, the lawyers concluded that her story was fabricated. On the day of the murder, Mona was busy shopping for Christmas. She called home to check if Dustin was up yet, as he had an important meeting scheduled. Her daughter answered and said that Dustin had left. She was relieved that Dustin was awake and going about his business. Later, Mona's nephew called to inform her that something had happened at Tracy's house. Mona rushed over, suspecting that Tracy and Michael had hurt each other, but she could not fathom that her son had been murdered. Mona mentioned that the day before the murder, Tracy had invited her son to her house to ask for help with something. Mona believed that this was Tracy's way of luring Dustin into a trap. She believed that Tracy was hiding something. However, no one paid attention to Mona's testimony until 7 years after the Roberts burglary. The same investigative team revisited the case and began to suspect that Tracy might not be the hero protecting her son, but a potential killer. There was no sign of forced entry or attempted robbery in the house. How could two people have broken in without leaving any evidence? Dustin had 9 gunshot wounds, indicating he had been shot at close range with no chance of survival, and there was no evidence of a second attack. The police decided to speak with Tracy's first husband, John. He described her as a monster, revealing that she had had bouts of aggression, including one time when she pointed a gun at him while threatening violence. She eventually fired a shot into the ceiling, prompting him to call the police. John discovered that Tracy was both aggressive and unfaithful. She drained their bank accounts. He even hired a private detective because he suspected she was cheating, and the detective confirmed that several of Tracy's lovers left their home while John was at work. Eventually, John filed for divorce because he began to fear Tracy. Concerned about their son growing up in such a toxic environment with an unstable mother, he fought for custody. This enraged Tracy, who tried to turn their son against John. A dentist was accused of raping Tracy during a dental appointment, but he claimed that she had been harassing him for a long time and was willing to prove it. His practice was equipped with cameras and the recordings supported his claim. It was revealed that Tracy, upon learning of this, had withdrawn her complaint against the dentist the day before the incident. Tracy's second husband, Michael, who she accused of being abusive and harassing her, denied all her allegations to police. He said Tracy was unfaithful. Michael claimed that he put up with these problems for the sake of his children but eventually decided to divorce her. He described himself as a strict father who never abused his wife and children and claimed that Tracy turned the children against him after their divorce. After the divorce, Michael moved to California to focus on his business. The Tracy seemed to slander everyone around her, presenting herself as a victim of abuse from the men in her life. However, the reality was quite the opposite. Police believed that her account of the events from December 13, 2001, was just another lie fabricated by Tracy. The police wanted to meet with Bert to gather more information, but Tracy not only moved to another state and changed her personal information, she also frequently changed her contact information. The police had to thoroughly review the entire list of evidence again. One significant item was an old computer discovered in the back seat of Dustin's car. Tracy believed this computer was crucial evidence in the robbery because it belonged to her husband. However, it was puzzling why Dustin would steal it when there were more valuable and easier to take items available in the house. Additionally, a pink notebook was found in which Dustin had written plans for the murder shortly before his death. The notes indicated that his mission included killing Tracy Roberts, and surprisingly, the person who ordered the assassination was Tracy's first husband, John. However, there was a strange detail in these notes. They contained so many specific details about events that Dustin could not have known before the attack, yet they were written in his own handwriting. It seemed that Dustin had written them under duress, possibly under threat. Dustin's mother did not recognize the pink notebook, which seemed more suited for a woman. Dustin disliked this color and would never have purchased such a notebook. He never kept diaries, and the only content in this notebook was a crime plan, which appeared unusual. It looked brand new and seemed to have been used only once for those notes. It suggested that Tracy might have given the notebook to someone to stage a crime. The latest investigation revealed that Dustin was not the attacker but Tracy's victim. It was also revealed that Tracy had been facing problems in her new town in Nebraska, where she had recently moved. She was charged with falsifying documents and false identity. 10 years after the murder, the police discovered the truth. On July 27, 2011, the police arrested Tracy. The memories of a friend who had helped Tracy clean out her house provided vital information. The friend knew about a notebook containing Dustin's confession. The police discovered that all of these statements had been recorded at Tracy's request. Police found no signs of an attack in the house. The wounds to her neck were self-inflicted, as evidenced by minor scratches that were not life-threatening. The claim that Dustin had struggled to stand up after being shot multiple times was clearly implausible. Forensic experts analyzed crime scene photographs and determined, based on blood spatter, that Dustin was still lying on the floor, with all the shots coming from above. This contradicted Tracy's version of events. The defense argued that Tracy was simply trying to protect her child. They said much of the evidence against her was circumstantial. The defense relied heavily on the testimony of Tracy's eldest son, Bert. He claimed that he heard men screaming and saw someone dragging his mother out the door. Bert also confirmed that the attacker told his mother that she was dead and warned that he would be next. He then saw a young man with a gunshot wound trying to get up, as his mother had described. However, the reliability of Bert's testimony has been questioned. Tracy initially mentioned that the nursery door was closed at the time, preventing Bert from witnessing the incident. The prosecution argued that Bert's account may have been influenced by his mother. The prosecution argued that Tracy killed Dustin to frame her husband, hoping to gain sole custody of their children and access to his money. This was considered the primary motive for the crime. That same day, Tracy confronted Dustin at gunpoint, forced him to write in a notebook, and then shot him. She then staged a scene to make it look like she had been attacked, inflicting minor injuries on herself and leaving a notebook and a computer in Dustin's car. A forensic expert later confirmed that her injuries were inconsistent with her being unconscious, further casting doubt on her testimony. After reviewing the evidence, the jury found Tracy Roberts guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tracy cried in court when she heard the verdict, but many people did not believe her tears, as they did not seem genuine. Again, she seemed to be acting. The situation was especially difficult for Bert, who was convinced that his mother had saved the lives of all her children that night and had been wrongly imprisoned. He continued to visit and support her. Years later, Tracy's second husband, Michael, with the approval of the guardianship agency, took the children back to Australia with his new wife. Tracy maintains her innocence and is currently serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility in Iowa.